synagogue, not inside, but there are people inside that synagogue, and they have barricaded themselves inside. Now, the mayor is on his way. He's going to the area as well. Just about every police officer in the city is in Squirrel Hill right now, trying to figure this whole thing out and piece this together. Multiple ambulances and emergency vehicles also there. Andy just told us that 4 people have been confirmed dead. There could be 7 or 8 who are dead. This happened outside in Squirrel Hill near the Tree of Life Synagogue. Now, calls started coming in around 10 this morning. That's about all we have at this point, but we do have crews there gathering information at this point. The mayor, again, on his way there, multiple ambulances there, other emergency crews, police from across the city are there. Now, we don't know if they have pinpointed the shooter, if he's in a building or if he's somewhere in the area still, but Megan Schiller is coming right back now with a little more information for us. Megan.
Good morning. We are here live in Squirrel Hill in the scene of an active shooter on Wilkins and Shady. That is the Tree of Life Synagogue. As Andy Sheehan mentioned, 4 reported dead so far, 8 people total shot. That is the count that we have right now from police sources. 2 officers were believed to be shot. That is why they called for all of the officers across the city to come out here as backup and to support the officers that were here first on scene. We are told that the officers that first arrived, they did receive gunfire. They had to use their police vehicles as shields in order to back up and to get out of the line of fire. The condition of the officers right now is unknown. We do know that the people who live in this area of Squirrel Hill are being told to shelter in place. Also new since I last was talking to you, Brenda, we did learn that they have found evidence inside the synagogue of the what the active shooter was possibly using, including they found a magazine from a semi-automatic handgun in a hallway. Also, they have found multiple shell casings inside. They, of course, are still going through the scene in order to process it. We also told that there were several people in the basement that they had rescued. They took them out of the basement. There also were some people that were in the atrium of the synagogue. They also were taken out, and they're still trying to get to some people who were hiding and barricading themselves inside of that synagogue. Also, we know that local hospitals right now are preparing to handle any possible victims that need to come their way. We know some hospitals just right in this area have been clearing out and making sure that they have enough beds in order to take on any potential victims. We, of course, are going to stay on top of this. The detectives have yet to come over to us and pass along any more information. This information is coming from KDKA's police sources.
You've been watching live coverage from our Pittsburgh affiliate, CBS affiliate there, KDKA. I'm Rena Ninen at a broadcast center at CBSN here in New York, and we are following this active shooter situation. Here's what we know. Outside of a synagogue, we know gunfire was exchanged. Our affiliate on the ground is saying 4 people are now confirmed dead. 8 have been shot. Potentially that number of dead could rise. We know that police did exchange gunfire with what is believed to be that shooter there. This is the area in Pittsburgh known as Squirrel Hill. It's the Squirrel Hill Synagogue is our understanding. We know the mayor is currently en route to this area. They are saying that all police and law enforcement resources have been sent to this area. They have now, as you can imagine, cordoned it off. Unclear whether there were services at that hour when the shooting took place. We don't know much else, but we are following this live coverage right now from our O&O station, KDKA. I want to take you back. We will continue to monitor this and have more live coverage.
But right now what we're seeing a lot of paramedics still and a lot of first responders that have been gathering. Firefighters, you can see them right there. Firefighters have now arrived. Detectives in plain clothes, officers are here, and officers coming from all across the city and the suburbs to help out. Officers on motorcycles. And right now, again, we're at the intersection of Solway and Murray Avenue, trying to bring you the very latest as this developing situation continues. We were told that when the officers first arrived, they received fire out of the front door of the building, and that the suspect was possibly popping out of windows. It took them quite some time, they said, to get an eye on the suspect, but we do know that they called for help. They asked for everyone to come to help out. When we first started hearing about this, we thought this was a drill, and we called police to ask if this was a drill because of just all of the screaming that was coming across the police scanner. However, they said that this unfortunately was not a drill, and they are asking for everyone to shelter in place. Right now, some of the ambulances are clearing away. I don't know if they're making way for a fire truck that is trying to come up Solway right now. But I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio, and we, of course, will have you come back out to us as soon as I get a little bit more information. Brenda?
Thank you so much. You got a lot of information. Recapping what Megan told us, 4 confirmed dead so far, as many as 8 people shot, possibly 2 police officers shot in this. When police officers arrived, they were fired at from someone inside the synagogue. Of course, they are back. Every emergency vehicle in the city is there. Ambulances, fire trucks, just about every police officer from every district in the area are at the scene right now. We understand that several people who were in the basement of the synagogue, I told you that people had barricaded themselves in the synagogue, they have been rescued. They're out of the building. All of the hospitals are now preparing for these victims to arrive there. They're making sure that they have enough beds. Now, this call came in this morning about 10 o'clock this morning of a shooter in the Squirrel Hill area near the Tree of Life Synagogue, and we're hearing from our reporters, that would be Megan and Andy, on the scene, that the shooter apparently was inside the building there and shooting at police officers. Again, 4 confirmed dead, 8 people shot, possibly 2 police officers shot as well. Very, very active scene there. If you live in Squirrel Hill, please stay inside. Police are asking that people not drive, not walk in the area. There are also several universities there. Those folks are also being told to stay inside. Those messages, emergency messages and text are appearing on several phones of the students in the area telling them not to go to the area. As I said, people were rescued from the basement of the synagogue. Let's go now to Andy Sheehan. He is also on the scene with more information. Andy.
Well, this is an active situation right now. Apparently, the gunman is confined to the 3rd floor, and he is engaging with officers. They have been trading gunfire. We had a report earlier that 1 policeman had been shot. Apparently not seriously, may have been shot in the hand. But now we learned that another police officer has been shot in this exchange in gunfire. They have him pinned down, sources tell me, on the 3rd floor of the synagogue. Right now we have confirmed that there are at least 7 people who have been killed by this gunman. When we arrived here, we saw police officers pinned down, crouched behind vehicles, arming themselves with semi-automatic rifles, and surrounding the synagogue. About 5 minutes ago, we saw all of those officers who had been crouched down on Shady Avenue run to the synagogue, and this is an active situation right now. Right now, on our camera, you can see that this whole area has been cordoned off for 3 blocks around. We are at Shady and Northumberland. We're about 1 block away from the synagogue. I came up the other way up Shady Avenue. It's cordoned off about a 6-block area. Across the street is the Children's Institute, the Rehabilitation Institute for kids with special needs. That's in lockdown. This entire neighborhood is in lockdown. Officers have been called in from across the region. We saw the arrival of the county SWAT team. They came to the synagogue. Apparently now all officers are in the building. They've been trying to rescue people out of the basement area. We understand that the gunman went in and shot 4 people in the upstairs, and then shot at least 3 people fatally in the basement of the synagogue. So obviously a very active situation. We're trying to get information about this exchange of gunfire between the gunman and the police officers, but we know that this is still an active situation.
so
Back
much.
to you.
All right, Andy, thank you so much. Let's recap what Andy just told us. The gunman is now confined to the 3rd floor of the synagogue. 7 people now are confirmed dead. We had 2 officers shot. We don't know if an officer is among the dead, but now we understand that another officer has also been shot. The gunman had those police officers, Pittsburgh police officers from every district in the city, had them pinned down for a while. He was firing upon them as they arrived at the synagogue. Our crews are about 1 block away from the synagogue. They're keeping everybody back. SWAT team is there. Just about every emergency vehicle is there right now. 3 people were killed in the basement of that synagogue. This is the Tree of Life Synagogue at Wilkins and Shady Avenues. 3 people killed there. Other folks, we understand, were rescued from the basement of the synagogue there, but 3 people were killed in that basement before they were able to get everyone out. As I said earlier, this started happening. We started getting calls about this emergency around 10 o'clock this morning. When we first got word of this gunman, we heard initially outside. Apparently, we are learning now from Megan and Andy that the gunman is inside, has been inside the building. He is now confined to the 3rd floor of the synagogue. Again, 7 people killed so far. We understand that possibly 3 police officers also shot in this. Now we have Heather Abraham joining me this morning. Good morning, Heather. How are you?
Good morning.
What a tragic scene out there this morning.
Unbelievable morning, and it's just incredible to hear these updates coming in. You're hoping that it would come to an end, that we would hear less loss of life, and now we've just heard 7 people killed. That was the update we just heard.
Up, yes.
It's really unfortunate, and we are still waiting to get additional updates from Pittsburgh police who are on the scene, but of course they are extremely busy still trying to get this shooter in custody.
He's confined now to the 3rd floor of the synagogue. So, you know, this is still very, very, very active. So I can understand they can't really stop and talk to reporters and tell them what's going on at this point. You can see them now. There's an ambulance there. They're taking folks to all of the hospitals. And from what I understand, all of the hospitals are making sure they have enough beds to receive all of these victims. So they are ready and waiting. Again, 7 people confirmed dead. There could be more. We're getting reports in now. And Andy Sheehan is waiting for us now. He must have some new information. Andy, what do you have now?
Give me a heads up that they're going to come to you.
So we are back here. We are at Shady Avenue and Northumberland. This is the cordoned off area surrounding the Tree of Life Synagogue, where this morning we've had this horrendous shooting event, which is still active. Recapping now, I'm told apparently the Tree of Life Synagogue is a conservative Jewish synagogue. Apparently what was going on this morning, in addition to the Shabbat services, was a bris, a Jewish ceremony with the circumcision of a child. A lot of people in the synagogue. And earlier this morning, this gunman came in and apparently initially shot, fatally wounding 4 people in the main floor of the synagogue, and then in the basement of the synagogue there were 3 other people who were fatally shot. We know that other people were shot. We do not know their condition. There may be more fatalities, but we know at least now that there are 7 confirmed dead. In the response of the officers, 1 police officer was shot, not fatally. I'm told that he may have been shot in the hand, but these were not life-threatening wounds to the police officer. In the aftermath here, this was a bolo. Every police officer in the region has been called here. The city SWAT team, the Allegheny County SWAT unit has been called in. They have surrounded the synagogue. When I came up here about a half hour ago, you could see multiple multiple officers, dozens, crouched behind vehicles with semi-automatic weapons surrounding the synagogue. About 10 minutes, 15 minutes ago, we saw those officers leave their crouched positions and rush the synagogue. I am told that the gunman has been confined to and is pinned down on the third floor of the synagogue, and that there has been an exchange of gunfire in which one police officer, another police officer, has been wounded. We do not have an update past then, but we know that this is still an active situation. We do not know the outcome of that exchange in gunfire, only that there was gunfire going off from both directions. You can see now police officers are still arriving. You can hear the sirens, and people are being told that to stay clear of this area. Across the street from the synagogue is the Children's Institute. We see now this would be the city of Pittsburgh. This is one of the city of Pittsburgh SWAT units is arriving right now. You can see it. They'll be waved in. You know, just an incredible amount of law enforcement here converging on this horrific event. I live in this neighborhood. This is a extremely quiet neighborhood. You know, Squirrel Hill has long been an enclave with a large Jewish population. There are several synagogues in Squirrel Hill, four to be exact, running the gamut of different conservative, reform, and Orthodox synagogues. This would have been a conservative synagogue, the Tree of Life, a very, very active congregation that is involved in this community. Never been an incident here that I am aware of. No information now about this gunman motive, anything. This is just a very active situation where these police officers are trying to subdue this gunman at this point. So back to you.
Thank you so much. Recapping what Andy just told us, 4 people killed on the main floor of the Tree of Life synagogue. 3 were killed in the basement of the synagogue. Police officer shot possibly in the hand.
Right, and that's the only officer shooter injury that we know of right now. Andy does not believe that that's a life-threatening injury. Just checking on the Tree of Life's website, and they did have Shabbat services scheduled for 9:45 this morning. But as Andy was telling us, Brenda, he also said that he's under the belief now that there was also a bris taking place at the synagogue this morning as well, in addition to their normal services. So again, 7 people killed inside the synagogue right now. As we understand it, Pittsburgh SWAT just arriving there at the scene.
They've been there.
And they've been there.
We saw them on the video coming in, right?
Additional,
there they are.
Yeah, additional vehicles coming in to assist there with the suspected gunman now pinned on the 3rd floor of the synagogue.
Yeah, they have him confined to the 3rd floor of that synagogue. Just about every police officer in the city has been called to Squirrel Hill. Not only police officers, we're talking about firefighters. Every emergency vehicle has been called to the Squirrel Hill area, and this is at the intersection of Shady and Wilkins Avenue. Again, this is the Tree of Life synagogue. 7 people confirmed dead. 4 people were killed on the main floor of the synagogue. Very busy there on a Saturday morning with services, and 3 people were killed in the basement. Several people were rescued from the basement there, but not before 3 people lost their lives there.
It is so unfortunate. This news is just devastating to hear this morning, to think these people were walking into a place that they felt comfortable and safe, a place of holiness and of their God, and to have something like this happen. We have not received any official updates from the city yet, as you can imagine. Very active situation. Mayor Bill Peduto is on his way to that scene. Firefighters there, medics there, police officers, as you mentioned, everyone in the city.
Okay. Calls began coming in just before 10 this morning, letting us know what was going on. People were calling the newsroom. We got this on as soon as we could to tell you what's going on. Andy Sheehan is now waiting to tell us more about what's going on in the area. Andy. Andy, can you hear us? I guess they're not ready. They're not ready to go on just yet. But again, recapping what's going on in Squirrel Hill this morning at the Tree of Life Synagogue. 4 people killed on the main floor of the synagogue and 3 people killed in the basement. Now, people had to be rescued from the basement. Unfortunately, 3 people were killed before they were able to get everyone out. Again, every police officer in the city is there. Megan Schiller is ready to come on now with a little more information. Megan, good morning. What else do you know?
Good morning. We are hearing reports that a suspect has surrendered and that a SWAT team has been talking with that suspect. The suspect still reported as alive right now. They are engaging him. We are told that he was crawling and that he was injured. That is the very latest from police. We have moved 2 blocks over to the corner of Murray and Northumberland. This is where we are told that they will brief the media. They will give us the very latest information. Pittsburgh Police is here, ambulances, people, firefighters from all across the city right now. We've seen people run by in armored vehicles. As you can see, officers that are walking by right now in tactical gear, everyone approaching. We're only a few blocks from the synagogue, the Tree of Life Synagogue that's located at the corner of Shady and Wilkins. So again, we were hearing that there was a possible surrendering occurring with the suspect who was reported alive yet injured. We're going to see if we can go back over to Andy Sheehan, who is reporting just a few blocks over. He's on Shady in Northumberland. Brenda, over to him if he's there right now.
I just lost him, man.
Again, according to recapping what Megan said, the suspect has surrendered. He is possibly injured. Police found him crawling inside the synagogue there, but he has surrendered, but not before this devastation. 7 people confirmed dead, 4 people killed on the main floor of the synagogue, another 3 killed in the basement, and people were rescued from the basement, but not before 3 people lost their lives.
Now, the last update that we had received from Andy Sheehan was that suspect was believed to be on the 3rd floor of that synagogue, and that they had him surrounded, they had him pinned and cornered up in that location of the synagogue. And as Megan just reported, the suspect is surrendering in some sort of sense. We believe that he still is in that building, but we saw numerous SWAT vehicles arriving on the scene, so we know that they are actively speaking with him at this point. Megan reported that he was crawling, appeared to be injured, is at least what she's hearing from her police sources.
That's right. Again, 4 people killed on the 1st floor of the synagogue. 3 others were killed in the basement. A lot of activity going on this morning inside that facility there this morning. You're being asked to stay inside. If you're watching us now, stay inside your homes in Squirrel Hill. If you live or work in the area, don't walk, don't drive in the area. Several universities in the area, they were getting emergency text messages on their phones. Many of the students were telling them to avoid the area as well. We understand that Andy Sheehan is now ready. Andy, do you have a little more information for us?
Okay, so we are here. We know now that they had pinned down this gunman in the 3rd floor of this building. We know now that this gunman has surrendered to the police. Apparently, they had him pinned down. There was an exchange of gunfire. Apparently, he has been injured. He crawled out from a crawl space, and he has surrendered. Only thing we know about him is that he is a white male and that he has a beard. In this exchange of gunfire, we know that there were 2 more police officers who were shot. We do not know their condition. We know that earlier a police officer was shot in the hand or sustained some non-life-threatening injuries. In this exchange of gunfire on the 3rd floor of the synagogue, there were 2 police officers who were shot. Again, we do not know the extent of their injuries. We now have in this horrific incident that 8 people have been killed. 8 people have been shot and were fatally wounded by this gunman who came to this synagogue earlier this morning, shot at least 4 people on the main floor, went to a basement of the synagogue, and apparently shot and killed at least 4 more people. 8 people dead in all. Other people have been shot. We do not know the extent of their injuries. As you can see, this situation is still an active one, and for police, they have cordoned off this entire area for several blocks. The synagogue is in a very quiet neighborhood in Squirrel Hill. It is across the street from the Children's Institute, a institute for rehabilitation of special needs kids. There are very few incidents in this neighborhood. This synagogue, the Tree of Life, is a conservative Jewish synagogue. This morning, they had scheduled a Shabbat service. I'm also told that there was also scheduled was a bris, a circumcision ceremony in the Jewish tradition. So the synagogue was probably jam-packed with people. I live in this neighborhood. I live just a block away from the Tree of Life. It is a very active congregation, very vibrant and active congregation. Big crowds around the synagogue on all the Jewish holy days. And so, you know, on a Saturday morning for Shabbat and for this other ceremony, the synagogue would have been full of people. So one can only imagine the terror that took place here this morning. Police from all over the region have responded. They have cordoned off the area. When I got here about 40 minutes ago, you would see police officers, dozens of them, who were crouched behind their vehicles with semi-automatic rifles in SWAT gear. The Allegheny County SWAT team was here. The city of Pittsburgh SWAT team. They had the building surrounded. I'm saying about 20 minutes ago, we saw everyone mobilized. Those officers who have been crouched down on Shady Avenue went to stormed the building. Apparently they had this gunman then cordoned off, pinned down on the 3rd floor. We know that there was an exchange of gunfire. 2 officers would have been shot at that point. We do not know their condition. We understand that the gunman, who is only described now as a white male with a beard, was also injured, and then after some negotiation, he surrendered.
Andy, thank you very much for that update.
You know, that law enforcement from throughout the region, you know, has been mobilized here. We also see, I am up on Northumberland Street, and that's the home of the police station and of a fire bureau. We're looking now at members of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire who are assisting in this effort. This is a sort of an unprecedented occurrence in Squirrel Hill. This is one of a number of mass shootings that have occurred in America, and now it's being visited, you know, upon you know, a very quiet and stable community of Squirrel Hill in the city of Pittsburgh. We're here. We're waiting word. We do not see from here any of this arrest taking place, this gunman being taken into custody, but we understand from police sources on the scene that in fact is what happened. But back to you.
All right.
Andy, thank you so much. And Brenda, I think what is noticeably different there is you can see kind of the scene clearing in that place where he is. I know he's about a block away from the synagogue, but just a few firefighters there and one police vehicle. So it seems like something has occurred at the synagogue.
As we said earlier, just about every officer from every district has been dispatched to this area. We want to thank those officers for doing a great job. We understand that the suspect has now surrendered, possibly injured. He was found crawling on that third floor where he had been confined at the synagogue. Now, Andy says now 8 people have been confirmed dead. 4 of those people were killed on the main floor of the synagogue. 4 others were killed in the basement. And I'm just getting a text message from friends who go to that synagogue, and we understand that a smaller synagogue uses the basement for their services. So it was 2 synagogues there. Well, so Megan is now standing by to tell us what else she's learned.
Megan?
And that is
Good morning. Yeah, we are hearing that people who work at KDKA have friends who have family members who were inside the synagogue whenever this happened. One woman that we know who had her 2 brothers that were inside the synagogue. We are working to talk to them and to get the very latest from when this all happened, what went through their minds, and what happened inside the synagogue. Obviously, we are still really early on. The number that Andy Sheehan has been giving you, that's the number right now. We are hearing reports that the number could be higher, and also we originally were told 2 officers shot. We are told that that number could continue to rise. We, of course, are still standing by. We're waiting for an update from Pittsburgh Police as well as Mayor Bill Peduto. We were told to stand here at the intersection of Murray Avenue and Northumberland to wait for an update. We're told that Murray Avenue is their staging ground. That's where they yelled for all of the officers to go as soon as the first arriving officers received fire from outside of the synagogue. They were told to use their police vehicles, to use whatever they could as a shield in order to get out of the way. We're standing right now behind a line of Pittsburgh police officers as well as state police officers, and there are some officials that are a little further down. For instance, just Ritz Fitzgerald, for instance, I see him there. They're talking to officers. So some of the leading officials in the city of Pittsburgh have now arrived here on Murray Avenue, and they are getting briefed. As Andy Sheehan mentioned, that suspect is in custody. We are told he is a male, a white male. We were told originally he was a heavier set white male wearing jeans with a beard. They also said that they found some magazines in the hallway. They also found shell casings throughout the building as they began their search in order to find victims and find people that were barricaded inside. They also were looking at a possible package that was being evaluated on the first floor. We're not sure if they believe that that's at all related to the suspect or suspects. At this time, we do know that there is one suspect in custody. However, we have not heard reports if there could possibly be more than one suspect. And we right now, again, are at the corner of Murray and Northumberland. We know that 3 people at least were rescued from the basement. They were trying to get others out. The people who called 911 reported that they were hiding, that they were barricaded inside. They were hearing multiple gunshots. At least one person calling police reporting that that person had been shot and called 911, struggling to breathe, yet calling 911 and asking for them to send help, to send any ambulance or any police officer in the area that could possibly help out and come here and offer backup. We're going to stand by here at the staging area. They won't let us go any closer because they say it's not safe. Right now, police officers on motorcades have been coming through, and we hope to hear from Pittsburgh Police and also from Mayor Bill Peduto. Obviously, right now they're gathering the information because that information continues to change by the minute. Local hospitals have already gone into preparation mode in order to make sure they clear room in their emergency departments. We, of course, will come back with the very latest as soon as we receive any more information. Back to you guys in the studio.
Developing situation right now, so much that is still unknown.
Now you have Susan Copen is on the phone. Susan, good morning.
Good morning, Brenda and Heather. So I just got off the phone with the former president of the Tree of Life, and I asked her to give me perspective on the building, to give me the layout of the building and how many people she believes would have been in the building at the time. So she said that there are 3 congregations that live in that building, and all 3 sections of the building would have been in use for the Saturday morning services. In her opinion, there would have been between 20 and 30 people in the building at that time of the morning services starting at 9:45. There would have been some of the older people in the congregations who would have been at the synagogue They're called the morning minuars. They show up to set up for Shabbat, to set up for the services. And I asked her about security in the building. Do you have to be buzzed in? Are the doors locked? What is it like on a Saturday morning? And she said, on a Saturday morning, as they prepare for services, the doors are open. They are open to everybody. So in her opinion, whoever the shooter is someone who could have just walked right into the building. During the week, the doors are locked and you have to be buzzed in to get in. But on a Saturday morning, this person could have simply just walked right into the building. I also just got off the phone with Brad Orsini. He is the Jewish community security chief. He is somebody who was hired by the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh because of security concerns, because of the fear of something happening. He is on scene. He said he didn't have any information to share with us, but he would talk to me later. But, of course, security, front of mind. Brad Orsini, the Jewish community security chief, someone hired by the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh because of situations like this and the reality of the world that we live in right now. But again, 3 different congregations that live in that building in Tree of Life. All 3 sections of the building would have been in use. Approximately 20 to 30 people in the building at that time. And in the former president's opinion, the shooter could have simply just walked right into the building on a Saturday morning.
Unbelievable. Susan, thank you so much for that information. And as she was just reporting, from what Susan understands, 3 congregations call the Tree of Life home. And they would all be joining there this morning for their Saturday services beginning around 9:45 this morning. Andy Sheehan had received information earlier this morning as well that a bris was also scheduled to take place this morning. And a bris is usually a very traditional thing in the Jewish community where you may gather at the synagogue. Usually the child is very, very young, maybe even an infant, just a few days old when something like this would take place.
And Susan was also saying that service begins there at 9:45 on Saturday. We're going to toss to Andy right now. I'm going to step out for a bit. Ken Rice is replacing me, but let's go now to Andy with more information.
Yes, there are people here that were in this. There are people here that were in the synagogue this morning. They are huddled. They are crying. They are in shock, and they are in grief as the reality of this situation is just starting to sink in. I had a chance to talk to some of them. They do not want to appear on camera. They are shaken, and they are grieving. And this has just been a sort of a knife through the heart of this neighborhood. People are, in fact, in shock of what has happened. I am getting word now from police sources that this man, I have a tentative identification on him. I don't want to share that at this time. I'd like to try to confirm that with law enforcement. But I am told that he came into this synagogue and he shot people yelling that all Jews must die. That he was a gunman motivated by anti-Semitic fervor, and shot up this synagogue this morning in a common Saturday morning occurrence, a gathering at the Tree of Life synagogue for Shabbat, Sabbath services. Also, I'm told that there was a bris, a Jewish circumcision ceremony in the basement, that he went through the building shooting almost indiscriminately, shouting these anti-Semitic spoutings about all Jews must die. He has been taken into custody. We do not see that, but we do know that he shot through the building, that people were huddled, others fled, and that in the initial response of law enforcement, that one police officer was shot. We're told that he may have been shot in the hand, but that his wounds were not life-threatening. But then there was a general all-hands-on-deck order from police agencies throughout the region, Allegheny County SWAT, City of Pittsburgh SWAT. Surrounded the building with heavy artillery, and then about an hour ago they rushed the building, and that there was an exchange of gunfire between police officers and this suspect on the third floor of the building. 2 officers were shot in that exchange of gunfire, but we're told also that the suspect, the gunman, was also injured somehow. I don't know if he was shot or not, but then after a negotiation, he did surrender. He is in custody. We do not see him. We have not seen any activity of him being taken away, but we are told by police sources that he is in custody. I will do some more digging to try to sort of confirm the identity of this gunman before we release his name. But the situation now is somewhat under control. The wounded, we know that we have confirmed tragically that 8 people are dead. I'm told that there may be other fatalities. We know that other people have been shot this morning. This is just, you know, a horrific mass shooting that, you know, has become all too common in this country and now has been visited upon Squirrel Hill in the city of Pittsburgh. Just sort of unbelievable occurrence here, an unbelievable tragedy that's occurred here. Right, you know, it would be in my own personal backyard. I live very close to here, so it's just a shocking, horrific event that's happened here, and it'll be some time before all this sort of sinks in.
Ken Rice,
back to you.
Andy, it's Ken Rice. I know that that's your neighborhood. You've been doing an exemplary job this morning under unbelievable circumstances. As you're giving us information on the suspect, I understand that it's early, that details are largely unknown, but is there any indication this is someone who lives nearby, works nearby, has any connection whatsoever to that synagogue or the Squirrel Hill neighborhood?
We do not know that. We know only that he has given the police officers his name. We know the details that we have about him are scant. Only that he is a white male, that he is bearded, that he has a name, and that he came in, burst upon this scene, shouting these anti-Semitic slogans while he unleashed gunfire on unarmed people who were here only to worship God, and it's an extremely cowardly, brutal act that he's perpetrated upon these people who are only here for services this morning. Ken, as you know, I mean, as people know, in this neighborhood is changing over the years, but it has always been known as sort of the Jewish neighborhood of the city of Pittsburgh. There are 4, maybe 5 synagogues in Squirrel Hill. They run from conservative to Orthodox to Reformed Jewish synagogues. It's the culture of this neighborhood. It is known as a Jewish neighborhood. It's actually probably only about 30 or 40% Jewish. But we, you know, this is a tight and loving, diverse neighborhood now that we don't have religious or ethnic tensions in this neighborhood that I'm aware of. But this has been visited upon this neighborhood. This has been visited upon us right now.
Andy, thank you very much. What we also don't know is the condition that the suspect is in. When we last heard, he was pinned on the 3rd floor before he surrendered and was taken into custody. At that point, the last report we had received was that he was crawling and possibly injured.
All right, we're going to go live now to Megan Schiller. She's speaking live with the CEO of the Pittsburgh, the Jewish Federation.
Right now on KDKA. So for everyone that's tuning in right now, can you say your name and explain your title for people that are watching at home? What do you manage?
I am Jeff Finkelstein. I'm the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. We are the main fundraising planning organization for the Jewish community. Part of our function actually is we employ a Jewish community security director who is actually on his way in. He's a 28-year veteran with the FBI, so we look at the issue of security throughout the Jewish community.
Where were you this morning when you heard the news first?
I was in my house here in Squirrel Hill.
Can you paint a picture of how, when you heard that, what was going through your head at that moment?
You know, I was in Israel till yesterday, and landed back in Pittsburgh late yesterday afternoon, and a little jet lagged, and when I heard that, I just everything just total sadness, emotion, worry, and I ran over here as quickly as I could.
I heard that someone who I believe oversaw the synagogue previously, that you guys have had discussions in the past about this kind of situation, that the FBI has come and consulted on this kind of thing. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is correct. We've done lots of training on things like active shooters, and we've looked at hardening facilities as much as possible.
Describe for me how many people would have been inside the synagogue on a Saturday morning, and what types of people would have been in there, what they would have been doing.
So I can't tell you exactly how many were in there. It depends if there was some type of bar mitzvah or other special event, which would bring more people. I would guess a Tree of Life, a typical Saturday morning, would have, at that time in the morning, maybe 50, 60 people, I guess.
You talked to Mayor Bill Peduto. What did he pass along to you?
He just said we'll do everything he can. The city will do everything it can to help out. And I also heard from Keith Rothfuss this morning, who's on his way here as well. Really appreciate all the help from our local politicians.
Do you have security guards there during Saturday morning services? How big is security an issue for you guys?
I'm not a member of Tree of Life. I can't comment on their security practices. You'll have to talk to someone from the congregation.
And officer, we just heard from Chris Togneri that there was at least one, he was in custody, the shooter's in custody. Hearing that, and then after what's been happening this morning, how does that make you feel, sir?
Now I'm just sad. I'm really, I don't know what to tell you. I just, my heart goes out to all these families. This should not be happening. Period. It should not be happening in a synagogue. It should not be happening in our neighborhood here in Squirrel Hill.
Can you describe the situation at Wilkins and Shady? We're told it's not just one synagogue, right? There's a couple buildings there.
There's one building. There are several congregations that share the same building.
Can you tell me a little bit, if in that room, if people were trying to get out of that room, are there exits, a number of exits available for that? What does it look like?
You know, I don't know which room they were in this morning. I can't comment. I'm sorry.
What's next for you in your position? What do you have to do? Who do you have to call?
So we're already in touch. I've been in touch with my colleague Brian Schreiber, the CEO at the JCC, and with our Jewish Community Security Director Brad Orsini and our Community Relations Director, and we're going to figure out what we need to do as a community to pull together, and that'll probably happen over the next 24 hours.
There are many cities that are streaming Pittsburgh News Live that are not familiar with Pittsburgh, and they don't understand the Jewish community in Squirrel Hill. Can you paint the picture for people that are watching that don't know Squirrel Hill?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh is very unique as far as its Jewish community goes. A little over 50, we just finished a community study, and it shows that a little over 50% of the Jewish community of greater Pittsburgh lives in or around this one neighborhood of Squirrel Hill. It's a high concentration of the Jewish community. It makes it very special, actually.
And just for people who are joining us right now, could you just repeat who you are, sir, and where you're with?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Finkelstein. I'm the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation Federation of Greater Pittsburgh.
Our other reporter, Andy Sheehan, said it's a conservative synagogue. Can you describe what that means?
A conservative synagogue is one that is traditional yet open to change and adaptation to modernity. I think it's the easiest way to say it. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And if we are still out here with us, we were just speaking with the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. We are here in the staging area. We hope to also hear again from Mayor Bill Peduto. He had come up to us a little bit ago with the Pittsburgh police spokesman, Chris Togneri. He said once he gathers more information, he will then address the media. So that will likely be the next update from us. We're at the corner of Murray and Northumberland. You just heard from him. He said that he will now go and alert many people, and he described for many people that are watching beyond Pittsburgh what this means for people in Squirrel Hill and for people of the Jewish faith. We, of course, will break back in whenever we receive another update here in Squirrel Hill, again at the corner of Murray and Northumberland, which is where they have the media stage. They won't let us get any closer. Murray Avenue was the staging center for police. It has seemed to die down a little bit right now in terms of the officers that were running through in tactical gear and ambulances. We still hear some sirens in the distance. Right now, we're going to continue to talk with neighbors, anyone who possibly could have heard the gunshots. We're only a few blocks from the Tree of Life Synagogue, but for now, we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
Megan, thank you for the update and for the interview. Again, the last update that we received, 3 officers shot. Their conditions are unknown this morning. The last update we received from Andy Sheehan, getting his information from sources, 8 confirmed fatalities that took place inside that synagogue.
And Andy adding the necessary proviso that there may be additional deaths. 8 confirmed. There may be additional. Police won't be able to say until they have a full grasp of that situation. Let's go to Andy right now.
Here, IFP, or no?
Andy, go ahead. You're live.
Okay, so we are back here at Northumberland and Shady. We're still about a block away from the Tree of Life Synagogue. We see people that were in the services this morning. They are now at the perimeter area. I've spoken briefly with some of them. They are in shock, and slowly the reality of this horrific situation is sinking in, and they are now in mourning, and they are crying. I've spoken with them briefly. Police officers and detectives are telling us to hold off. They are trying to take statements from these people. They are now going to do sort of a forensic remapping of this event, and they want to take witness statements before they talk to any media to find out what happened. Recapping, we know that a suspect is in custody after a shootout with police on the 3rd floor of the synagogue. This after he shot and killed at least 8 people. We know that in all 3 police officers were shot and wounded. We know that one police officer initially was shot, not in a life-threatening manner, but may have been shot in the hand. We know that 2 officers were shot in the exchange of gunfire with this gunman on the 3rd floor, but we do not know the extent of their injuries. We know that there was a negotiation, that the gunman was injured, and that there was a negotiation, and that he eventually crawled into the custody of police. We do not see the gunman. We did not see him being taken away from this vantage, but he is in custody, and police are taking statements from him. We know from police sources that he came into this building that was crowded with Shabbat and people attending a bris ceremony, and indiscriminately shot up the building, shouting anti-Semitic statements that all Jews must die. We know that this is a hate crime. We know this is a horrific mass shooting that's happened throughout the United States of America, but now it has happened within the city of Pittsburgh, in this very quiet, known as Squirrel Hill, known sometimes oftentimes as a Jewish neighborhood, probably about 30–40% Jewish population, but known throughout the history of the city of Pittsburgh as having a large Jewish population. Apparently why this gunman selected this neighborhood and this synagogue. Back to you.
All right, Andy, quickly before we go, we heard there may be, several dozen people attending the Sabbath services this morning. Do you know where are people? Are they still on the scene? Have they been taken somewhere? What's the status of those who were witnesses and not among the injured?
What can we do?
All right, we may have lost Andy Sheehan. Heather, go ahead.
We did want to get back to Megan Schiller, and she is standing by with the former president of Tree of Life, who can maybe provide a little bit more insight into what would take place on a Saturday morning there. Megan.
Thank you. His name is Michael Eisenberg. He's the immediate past president of Tree and Life Synagogue. He said he stepped down from the position a few months ago, and he's going to speak with us right now. He can offer some insight about what all would have been happening at the hour that the gunman went inside the synagogue. What would have been happening? You said around 9:45, right?
9:45. There are three simultaneous congregations services that are being held in the main part of the building. Tree of Life is having a service that has about 40 people in it. Just below that service area, there's a basement area where New Light congregation would be having their Shabbat service. They would also be have around 30 to 40 people. And then just adjacent to Tree of Life's service area, Congregation Dor Hadash is in the rabbi's study room, and they would have approximately 15 people in there. Just all of these are just off of the main entrance to the building.
We were hearing reports of people being found in an atrium and in a basement. So the atrium is just that entranceway area.
There's a common atrium area where it's a central part of the building. It leads up to the services, but oftentimes there are people milling around in that area, either going to the ladies' room, men's room, or the coat room.
If I'm a person that's walking past the corner of Wilkins and Shady at that time, can I walk in freely? Is there anyone that would greet me at the door or stop me?
Not typically. On a day like today, the door is open. It's a religious service. You could walk in and out. Only on the high holidays is there a police presence at the entrance.
You mentioned to me when you were president there, again, if you're just tuning in, you were the last president, the immediate past president. How big of a concern was security for you?
It was a major concern for me, for us. We were working with the Department of Homeland Security to evaluate exit routes. I just spoke to our maintenance person who was able to get out because the doors were easily opened from the inside to allow him to get out of the building. But it was a major focus working with Brad Orsini at the Jewish Federation. He's a securities expert, what to do in an active shooter situation, active shooter training. We were working with the other synagogues on what to do if something horrific like this happened.
Who else have you talked to that was inside at the time of the shooting, and what have they told you so far?
The main person, the one person that I did speak to, I know really well, the Augie, the maintenance person, one of our maintenance people there. He's been there 25 years. He is usually a very cool and collected person. He was shaken. He saw one of our congregants down, but he knew he was in the bathroom, and he was able to get out of the building again because these exit doors were working well, and I just can't tell you how thankful I am just to have do that one piece of one task that Homeland Security told us to do.
Because in the past, you couldn't push through the exit doors?
They weren't easily opened, and they had safeties on them so that they couldn't open either way. But now he was able to get out. I mean, he could be alive because of this.
A few blocks away myself.
Where were you when you found out that this had occurred?
I was heading up to the service. I'm there I was there last night for a service. I go up there around 10 o'clock in the morning, and one of the vice presidents that I work with on facilities now that I stepped down, he called me. He works for the city emergency management, and he said he just got word that there's an active shooter at Tree of Life. Go up there and see if this is true. And I tried to get up. I only live a block away from the synagogue, and I tried to get up Shady Avenue, and it was police cars everywhere. There were guns drawn, rifles. I was surreal.
We first thought it was a drill. Whenever it came over the police scanner, we thought we couldn't even believe it. Have you heard about any people that were victims inside, their positions, or if you knew of them?
No, I'm sure. I know everyone there. I know everybody in the building. I know that this. I almost don't want to know, but I have to know the tragedy that occurred inside.
What have you been talking with the other people that are past presidents or in a position of power within the Jewish community here in Squirrel Hill? What has everyone been saying to you?
Well, I mean, all we had up till now is I called all the tried to call a lot of, I couldn't reach, but the other past presidents. I spoke to the current president, but we were all either not in the area or we were en route and we just couldn't get in there. I mean, I was walking, like I said, I was walking up Shady, and all of a sudden just hear these shouts from the police officers, just get out of here. You knew it was not a drill.
Had you ever had issues in the past with people coming in, people that were suspicious in any way or did anything that it caused you to be concerned?
No, we've never had any threats. I will tell you, I've always had a very watchful eye because of what's going on in the current climate. You know, you see these bombs being mailed across the country, and our security was really just that nobody's ever tried. You know, it was just the fact that nobody ever tried to do anything because, you know, like most religious institutions, we have an open door.
I asked the CEO of the Jewish Federation the same question I'll ask you. Can you describe for people that are watching that aren't from Pittsburgh, that don't know Squirrel Hill, what this means for the Squirrel Hill community, that they would be targeted in this manner?
It just means that moving forward, this is a real occurrence and that we need to learn from this. And you want to be proactive and do things in light of this happening. It will be a catalyst for more security in the future, I'm sure, across all congregations, all religious institutions, because this is reality.
But you're glad if you hadn't done that one thing, which many would think is a simple security measure, who knows how many people use those exit doors to get out.
Right. It was something that I was listening to the walkthrough. I was listening to the Homeland Security experts, and a lot of this comes down to ability to afford security, but to free up a door many times is free. Just use it. And it doesn't cost anything, and we did it. And a guy that we love in the congregation, you know, Augie, it could very well be alive because of it, because when he went to use that door, he got out of the building.
And he was not in the basement. Are there ways to get out of the basement?
There are, yeah. Yes, there are. And a New Light congregation who their New Light sanctuary is in the lower floor of the building. They know the route to get out.
What's next for you?
Next for me is going to be more training, saying this. It's not that when I would get up as president in front of leadership and say this could happen. Now it's like this did happen. We have to put forth efforts to secure our building, and all the other leaderships across Squirrel Hill and probably across the country are going to have to do the same.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. Thank you. All right, we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio. That was the immediate past president of the Tree of Life Synagogue, walking us through what it's like inside the synagogue. We are hearing reports that possibly the governor has arrived. We're going to go and try to find more officials, and we will be live again as soon as we get more information. But for now, we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
Megan, thank you very much for that update. We are still waiting for an official update from authorities there. We have not heard from them officially yet. As you can imagine, they've been extremely busy up until this point. We believe that the suspect is in custody. His name has has not been released. We're hearing some names floated around, but at this point, you know, it's unsafe to say exactly who it is.
Before we go back to Andy Sheehan, if we can, I believe we can roll some tape of a spokesperson for the Pittsburgh Public Safety Department, Chris Togneri. Do we have that?
The suspect in the shooting is in custody. We have multiple casualties inside the synagogue. We have 3 officers who have been shot. And at this time, we have no more information because we are still clearing the building and trying to figure out if the situation is safe, if there are any more threats inside the building. So that's all we have at this point. But the shooter is in custody. We have multiple casualties and 3 officers shot. Thank you.
Can you take a step by step?
Mr. Mayor, could you add anything at all?
We're being told.
Once the situation stabilizes, there's still a lot of information that's missed. We're just going to wait and get. We want to be sure when we have everything. So we'll be coming back to you. There are fatalities, but we're not commenting yet on what there are.
We'll be back to advise the media on a regular basis, but at this point, that's all we have.
When there is an official briefing, we intend to bring that to you live.
And you could see some of the county officials there. We had County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, Mayor Bill Peduto on scene, hearing reports now that Governor Tom Wolf is also there near the synagogue as well.
And this has gotten the attention of the president this morning.
He tweeted about 10 o'clock this morning, and this was just minutes after the report started coming out about what had happened. He said, watching the events unfolding in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, law enforcement on the scene, people in Squirrel Hills should remain sheltered. Now, again, this was earlier this morning. We don't know if that's still the request from local law enforcement. He adds, looks like multiple fatalities, which we do know at this point is true. Beware of active shooter. Now, the latest update we have is that the shooter is in police custody, his name not being released. The last update we got on his condition is that he is possibly injured when he was pinned on the 3rd floor of the Tree of Life synagogue. They were reporting that he was crawling on the floor, appeared to be injured, but again, we have not received an update on who he is or his condition.
I believe Andy Sheehan does have an update for us. Andy?
Well, Ken, I am talking to people on the scene, officers, sources that I have. We have 8 confirmed dead this morning. I am told by people on the scene, one source says that there are 11 people dead. That is unconfirmed, but this is a horrific tragedy here in the city of Pittsburgh. I do have information on the suspect. Those people, and this is unconfirmed information, but we have a name of Rob Bauer. He is a 48-year-old. He is a heavy-set white male who has a beard. This is all the information we know, and I'm telling you that is unconfirmed, but the people that are giving me that information are reliable sources, and so I am telling you now. I have no other information about this suspect except for a name. I don't know if he is a resident of this area, city of Pittsburgh, but we do know from these same sources that he burst into this synagogue at 9:30 this morning and shot indiscriminately throughout the building, killing at least 8 people. Shooting 3 police officers. One was shot earlier in this whole melee. That officer was not did not receive life-threatening injuries. But then in the shootout later on the 3rd floor of the synagogue, 2 other officers were shot, and we do not know their conditions. We know that that he burst into this synagogue and that he was shouting anti-Semitic statements. I'm quoting him. People quote him as saying that all Jews must die. We're told that this was a Saturday morning Shabbat Sabbath service, and that there was also a bris ceremony going on. So the Tree of Life was packed at that time. There are people here a block away from the synagogue that were in the synagogue this morning. I've spoken to them briefly. They are giving statements to the police right now, and the police do not want them speaking with the media because they are doing sort of a reconstructive, forensic reconstruction of what happened, and they will be witnesses later on. So they are sort of reconstructing what happened. Rob Bauer is in custody right now. We do not know his whereabouts, whether he's been taken to the hospital. We're told that he sustained some injury in this shootout. We don't know whether he was shot or there was some sort of other injury, but there was a negotiation after he was pinned down, and that he then agreed to surrender and crawled to police, where he was taken into custody. Officers continue to arrive here. You know, this was an all-points bulletin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninan. Thank you for joining us. We are following a tragedy in Pittsburgh this morning. At least 8 people have been killed after a gunman opened fire at the Tree of Life synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. This happened on Saturday morning. Typically, it is the busiest time of the week for any synagogue. Several others have also been wounded in the attack, including at least 3 police officers who engaged in a shootout with the suspect before taking him into custody. Our Pittsburgh station reports those who were killed were actually in the basement of the building and also in the main floor as well. Here's what police had to say just a short time ago.
The suspect in the shooting is in custody. We have multiple casualties inside the synagogue. We have 3 officers who have been shot. And at this time, we have no more information because we are still clearing the building and trying to figure out if the situation is safe, if there are any more threats inside the building. So that's all we have at this point, but the shooter is in custody. We have multiple casualties and 3 officers shot.
Joining me now, Paul Violas. He's a CBS News law enforcement and security analyst. Paul, the situation seems to have been contained relatively quickly. What is the protocol for a situation like this and this kind of an incident, particularly with a synagogue?
Well, Rena, you mentioned the correct word, and it's containment. The Pittsburgh Police Department.
Paul, unfortunately, you're breaking up. Is there a way that you could stand in one area, Paul? Unfortunately, the line is breaking up.
Can you hear me now, Rena?
Yeah, it's perfect. Great.
Okay, great. You mentioned the correct word. The word is containment, and that's exactly what Pittsburgh PD had to do. That's why they're still clearing buildings. They believe they had one shooter and only one shooter, but they're going to continue to clear buildings to ensure that there was nobody else. That's what they're doing right now, is complete containment.
When the suspect surrenders, which is what police, we believe, happened here, what tactics do you have to take to get someone like this, who, our understanding all morning, he was located on the 3rd floor of this synagogue, communicating with SWAT? We believe he was injured. What happens in that type of situation?
Well, the very first thing that happens is SWAT team has to locate the shooter, which of course they did, and they did so real quickly. But the most important part is isolating the shooter, making sure that he can't or she can't hurt anyone else. Once they close him in, they have to shut off all exits. This person has to feel there's absolutely no way out, and that's exactly what they did, and they did it real quickly. At that point, now they have leverage and they have a bargaining chip in order to get him to surrender, which is exactly what happened.
Paul, I know there are so many people who attend places of worship, synagogues, churches, particularly if you are a parishioner who attends a synagogue. We know NYPD has already upped security at synagogues throughout New York City. What should folks be concerned about, particularly as they worry as they enter a place of worship?
You know, Rena, that's such a really important question, especially now. Hate crimes are up about 12%, and we know over the last 4 years they continue to rise. But as specifically as it relates to anti-Semitism, Jews are, over a study the FBI just recently did, Jews account for over 54% of the targets of a hate crime. So, you know, the probability of risk here with hate crimes in the United States has risen dramatically. And your question is poignant, to say the very least. When we start asking ourselves, what do we need to do in order to protect ourselves when we go to a house of worship? That's a frightening question, even though it's one that people keep asking. And it's something that, whether it be a synagogue, a mosque, a church, whatever it may be, it's something that these religious leaders are grappling with right now. I know I work with quite a few of them on a variety of different fronts about security, a balance of security, and providing peace of mind and safety at the same time.
You talk about peace of mind and safety at the same time. You know, we heard from one of the former president of this particular synagogue, the Tree of Life, who had said that they had actually taken precautions. They have a former FBI agent, 20-year veteran, who was giving guidance for all these four various synagogues throughout this area. When people employ that sort of thing, we believe that they could have even undergone active shooter training. What do synagogues need to know to be alert in that type of situation?
Well, we would have to know more about this particular situation. And clearly, when you hire someone with that kind of credential, you know that you're going to get really top-shelf counsel. But that still doesn't stop someone, as it appears this individual barges in and starts screaming, you know, all Jews must die, and he's heavily armed. I mean, that's not going to stop that unless, of course, and Rena, you know, you and I have talked about this before, unless, of course, we go to access control at the front door of all houses of worship and metal detectors. And I don't know that we're going to go there. It's still something that we have to find a balance for, Rena, and we just haven't found that balance yet.
And Paul, when we hear that, we have heard the NYPD is fortifying synagogues throughout New York City to make sure parishioners are okay. In that instance, what does NYPD do to make sure they are safe?
Well, first part of it, believe it or not, starts with intelligence gathering, and NYPD's intel unit is second to none. I mean, they're phenomenal, and that's gathering information off the internet, off the underground, the dark net, as well as other sources as to any probability of risk that may be brewing at that point in time for that house of worship. And then it's counseling them on proper physical security, proper access control, strategically placing closed-circuit television cameras, incorporating artificial intelligence software so that if there are people that need to be kept out or be aware of, they can do so preemptively, just to name a few. And then working with them on active shooter training and then expeditious evacuation drills that are non-fire related. All of those things are what we see police departments working with the houses of worship on.
Based on what we know at this point, which are just reports from our station, our Pittsburgh station, KDKA, we have heard throughout the morning that this was a white male, potentially with a beard, possibly in his 40s at this point, coming from our station there in Pittsburgh. And also shouting out anti-Semitic remarks as he was shooting indiscriminately into the synagogue. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that it pretty much goes right along the lines of the quintessential profile that fits someone that perpetrates acts of violence such as this, from the age to the race to the gender. We'll probably find out a lot more about him as we move along, bearing in mind, Rena, you know, what we know at this point, look at the custody police are going to need securing search warrants for the home, vehicle, devices such as laptop and phones to see if he worked with anybody, how he planned it, and who he's affiliated with. All of that's going to be happening right now.
At this hour, police are assessing if that synagogue is safe to go back into. We know there was a bris ceremony, a circumcision ceremony for an infant that was expected to take place. 9:45, the services, Shabbat services, were expected to be held. We believe the shooter entered. Early accounts are roughly 9:30 this morning. When we talk about protecting a synagogue like this and this type of a situation, Paul, what is priority number one if you find yourself in something like this?
If you're actually there, you know, and this is something that's so important for us to keep our arms around and for our viewers to understand. Active shooters are something that we contend with quite a bit, whether we be at a house of worship or we're in a mall or whatever the case may be. The first step is to try to find a location where you're safe at, where you can at least find cover, not just concealment meaning something to stand behind, but cover, something that will protect you from any kind of line of fire. Turn your cell phone to silent. Make sure that you can't be detected. These are the first two things. Try to find an exit. Third or fourth is if you can evacuate safely, you can ascertain that there's a clear path to evacuate, then take that evacuation route. If it's not clear and safe, then close yourself in and stay there until you get an all clear from police.
Fascinating to hear you say make sure you seek some sort of shelter and then also to turn your cell phones off.
Yes, well, turn them on silent at least, because the last thing, and I've worked cases like this, Rena, the last thing we want is for somebody to shelter in place, keep their cell phone on, the shooter's still active, and their phone rings.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's very, very important.
Very, very important to silence your phone. I want to bring in retired FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole. She joins us now by phone. Mary Ellen, based on what we have heard, also an account that the shooter came in shooting indiscriminately, shouting, "All Jews must die." What strikes you about this?
Well, a couple of things. That this was, it had at least some planning, that the shooter would have known what this facility was and who would be there, that what the religious affiliation was, and that, again, that takes some research, even if it's a minimal amount, and that he went in there and shouted. He wasn't going in there quietly, so he wanted them to know what his feelings and attitudes were. So I think that certainly suggests part of the motivation for why he did that, and there certainly will be more additional motivation. And it also sounds like he went in with the intention for maximum lethality, and that term means to shoot and kill as many people as possible. Now, that will be confirmed once law enforcement speaks to the survivors to find out, did this individual walk around and shoot people? Did he just shoot particular people? But it sounds like it was initially it was indiscriminate. He just went in there to shoot people. But it is important from my perspective as a behavioral analyst to know how he did those shootings.
I'm sorry, Marilyn.
Yeah, how he did the shootings is important, which means if he ran in and he shouted that statement, but then did he walk around cool, calm, and collected as he's inside shooting people? And of course, it's very traumatic for the victims, but that tells me a lot about his thinking and his thinking strategically if he's cool, calm, and collected while he's in there.
That's fascinating to hear you say. If someone is cool, comes in shooting, cool, calm, and collected, what do you read from that?
Well, that tells me that his ability to be so cool under pressure like that, that's actually a personality trait. And that says that when people start saying this person is crazy or this person is unstable, just his behavior inside that scene would say to me, no, he was not, because he was thinking so strategically.
When you talk about thinking so strategically, Jeffrey Finkelstein, who's the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, said they had just done a study on the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, and they found out a little over 50% of the Jewish population in Pittsburgh actually live in this particular area, Squirrel Hill area. There are at least 4 synagogues, is our understanding, in this small vicinity. What does that tell you about why he targeted the synagogue?
Well, certainly that would suggest that he might very well know that is the area where the synagogues are. And excuse me.
Yeah, I know you're getting a sip of water, Mary Ellen. I'm just fascinated also what you're telling us about the profile of this man in this area. Mary Ellen O'Toole is joining us now. She is a former FBI profiler and knows much inside the mind of suspects like this who choose to do these acts of violence. Mary Ellen, are you a little better?
I am better. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My asthma is kicking up.
Don't apologize.
Yes, he would have, if he was familiar with that area, and it suggests that he was at least somewhat familiar with the area, he could have gone and looked for which synagogues had the most activity, or which were the biggest, or were there events taking place during this morning's ritual. So he could have targeted the right place. But what that also suggests is that he's been in this area before. He's looked around, he's walked around, he's familiar with how to get in and how to get out. Not intimately, but at least familiar enough. And what they'll do is they'll pull, obviously, the video cameras to see, because in many of these shootings, there's always, oftentimes, the shooter will go in days ahead of time.
Mary Ellen, I want to give you a second to sort of catch your breath and get some water to make sure your asthma is okay. I also want to highlight to our folks that this particular synagogue that was shot into is known as the Tree of Life Synagogue. It is a conservative synagogue, and by conservative, I don't mean it's politics. I mean it's not Reform or Orthodox. The former president of this Tree of Life Synagogue actually spoke earlier about security. I want to play a bite for you.
No, we've never had any threats. I will tell you, I've always had a very watchful eye because of what's going on in the current climate. You know, you see these bombs being mailed across the country, and our security was really just that nobody's ever tried. You know, it was just the fact that nobody ever tried to do anything because, you know, like most religious institutions, we have an open door.
We have an open door, and that door certainly opened today as services took place at 9:45. We believe the shooter entered right around that time. There was a bris taking place, a circumcision ceremony for an infant is scheduled to take place this morning. Former members of this synagogue have told us that 20 to 30 people usually are here around that time worshiping. There are 3 different congregations inside that building who usually worship on Saturday morning for Shabbat services. I want to bring back in former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole. Mary Ellen, we know now the governor and the FBI are on the scene at this point. They are working to assess whether that synagogue is safe. It still remains under lockdown. When you see the FBI and they enter a situation like this, what do they do starting off?
Well, they blend in with the responding officers who are already at the scene. So the SWAT team from the FBI will probably be there. Also negotiators, just in case they're needed. They'll also bring in the our evidence response team, who will blend in with the evidence response teams that are already on the ground with Pittsburgh Police Department, and they'll just start working the scene. They'll also bring in most likely victim witness people that will work with the victims that will be interviewed ultimately to determine what they saw, but also to provide them some comfort. So they'll actually just blend in with the officers who are already on the ground.
And Mary Ellen, in your experience, just based on what little we know right now about a potential profile of who this suspect is, who is now in custody, what stands out to you? Who does this type of act of violence?
Here's what I think is really interesting, but it's also so important to know, is that an act of violence like this doesn't just start this morning. It really starts in their thinking and in their kind of in their planning and in their mind, and it starts in their brain basically, and it can go back for months or for years that they're thinking about their hatred, and it's just becoming even more and more intense. And then he may post things online about how he feels about Jews and other groups, and then take steps to acquire the weapon, to practice. But the thinking about committing a crime like this really predates the crime itself. It's not something, they don't go hand in glove. So it's the thinking first, and then it's the act itself. And it's during that thinking period of time that we know there are red flags to tell people close to the shooter or neighbors or maybe somebody that he works with if he's employed. These are the signs to look for, but particularly with people that are more in a living situation with the individual. Because leakage is probably one of the most preeminent warning flags, which is telling somebody ahead of time what you're going to do. And in so many of these cases, there is leakage beforehand, announcing either online or to somebody else, I've had it, this is what I'm going to do.
Mary Ellen O'Toole, a former FBI profiler. Mary Ellen, I want to thank you very much for joining us and giving us some perspective on all of this.
You're very welcome.
Thank you again, Mary Ellen. I'm Rena Ninen here at our broadcast center in New York. We have been following this active shooter situation that has taken place all morning long. What we know right now, 8 people confirmed dead at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh. An area known as Squirrel Hill is where the shooting took place. It's believed that 50% of the Jewish population live in this area who are part of the Pittsburgh community. At this hour, police are telling us that they do know that they have the shooter in custody. They are working to assess if that synagogue is safe to go back into at this point. We know here in New York, NYPD is fortifying all synagogues throughout the city and potentially also throughout the country to make sure places of worship are safe in this country. So today at 9:30 a.m., we believe the suspect did enter this area, did start indiscriminately shooting and shouting, "All Jews must die." We believe that this particular synagogue had undergone some sort of training to protect their citizens in this synagogue in case of this type of a situation were to happen. I want to return you now to live coverage of our Pittsburgh station, KDKH.
Clearing this section, we're right at the corner of Murray Avenue and Northumberland. So those motorcycles now have gone through. I also want to let you know we talked to Rabbi Chuck Diamond. He said it's going on year 2 since he was a rabbi at the Tree of Life Synagogue. He said since there were 3 services going on, there would have been 3 rabbis that were present in the building. Rabbi Klein, Rabbi Perelman, and Rabbi Myers. Rabbi Klein is a female rabbi and the other 2 are males. He said that they would have been leading or preparing to lead those services that would have started just before 10. He said he has not made contact with any of them. He said Rabbi Myers is the one who took over from him and is currently in charge and leading that Tree of Life Synagogue. Those are just 2 of the interviews that we've done in just the past couple minutes here on the scene. All of them saying that up until now, whenever they discussed security, they said, well, what if it happened, or if it could happen, this is what we would do. He said now they're going to say it did happen and they will take more security measures going forward. And we are told, as Heather mentioned, Governor Wolf on scene here. We have yet to hear from Governor Wolf. We've also yet to talk with Mayor Bill Peduto, except a couple passing words. He said he's currently just trying to get up to speed with the latest information, and he is expected to address the media. Also, you probably heard a very quick update from Pittsburgh Police spokesman Chris Togneri. All he would say for us right now is it's still a very active situation, multiple fatalities, and now they tell us they're going to need us to move out of the way as they get another Pittsburgh police cruiser out of this area. Again, we're at the staging area of Murray Avenue and Northumberland. We're going to send it back to you guys in the studio, and you'll come back to us in a little bit. Hopefully, we will get another update from Pittsburgh Police within minutes out here in the staging area. All the media has congregated at this intersection, and we are hoping to talk with city officials in just a few moments.
Okay. Megan, thank you. Some comments on Twitter coming now from Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. Quote, "We are devastated. Jews targeted on Shabbat morning at a synagogue, a holy place of worship, is unconscionable. Our hearts break for the victims, their families, and the entire Jewish community. We are actively engaged with law enforcement to understand the extent of this anti-Semitic attack, and we will work together with communities across the country to push back on prejudice wherever it appears." Again, that's from Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, ADL.
And we've heard a tweet from President Trump earlier this morning as well. Governor Wolf putting out a statement saying that whatever resources the city needs, he will be sending them, and he is on scene, as we could just see from that live shot. This all unfolded around 10 o'clock this morning. Services began at Tree of Life at 9:45 with 3 different congregations using that building as their home.
Right. You have the Tree of Life congregation, the home congregation meeting. You have the New Light congregation, which moved not too long ago. They had their own building elsewhere in Squirrel Hill. They decided to consolidate things. They now are essentially guests of Tree of Life. They have services in the basement.
In the basement of that facility.
There's a smaller congregation still known as Dor Hadash, which meets, I believe, in the rabbi's study. So all 3 were having their services simultaneously this morning when this gunman burst in.
So some of the first information we were getting in from Andy Sheehan on the scene, as he was learning from sources and people there at the scene, is that in addition to the usual Saturday services that they would hold around 9:45, that there was also a scheduled bris scheduled to take place as well this morning, which means in addition to the regular congregation, you're going to have additional families there gathering for this celebratory occasion.
Right. A ritual circumcision typically happens on the 8th day of a Jewish child's life, Jewish boy's life. So yes, it would have been a busy place. There would have been a lot of activity. A typical synagogue on a Tuesday afternoon would be relatively quiet. On a Saturday morning,
very busy.
That's when you would have people there on a weekly basis, and that's when this gunman decided to strike. Once again, in addition to the 8 fatalities confirmed, there is an unknown number of wounded. We know that multiple patients have been sent to UPMC Presbyterian Hospital. It is possible that other hospitals in that area may have received patients. We're working as we speak to gather all of this information and to find out the extent of those injuries.
And Andy believes that that number may have increased because we do not know the extent of those injuries. We don't know if some of them were life-threatening as they were rushed to the hospitals. We also know that 3 officers were injured. Andy was hearing from some of his sources sources that one of the officers may have been struck in the hand, but again, we don't know the severity of the other two, and we are still working to get more information. John Shumway appeared to see one officer carrying another or helping, assisting another officer into UPMC Presbyterian, where we understand a number of patients are being treated.
People are saying this is an anti-Semitic act because of what the gunman said. The gunman was heard shouting anti-Semitic rhetoric, including "all Jews must die," as he began indiscriminately firing at people at this congregation at Tree of Life this morning. Tree of Life, one of several prominent synagogues in the Squirrel Hill section of Pittsburgh. They're at the corner of Wilkins and Shady. You have Rodef Shalom, Reform congregation on 5th Avenue, not far from St. Peter, or from St. Paul, excuse me. You have Beth Shalom, which is just a couple of blocks away, just off of Shady Avenue. But this is a landmark in the Jewish community. It's part of the foundation of Squirrel Hill, and it's almost impossible to imagine the number of families, the number of lives that have connected at some point with this congregation for some type of ceremony, for a relative's observance of something. It is the kind of place that has been a part of many lives over many generations.
And we know that it's impacted people even here at KDKA, friends, know people who attend there, attend themselves. We are still working again to get all of the details confirmed. 8 people confirmed dead that we know of. We understand that when the gunman entered, as Ken had just mentioned, was shouting anti-Semitic slurs, saying "all Jews must die," reportedly. In the first floor, on the first floor, we understand that that is where 4 people were shot and killed. Again, a number of others injured. Down in the basement where New Light congregation holds their services, and they were maybe just about 15 minutes into it, 4 other people shot and killed there.
All right, we have an update now from John Shumway at Presbyterian Hospital. John, go ahead.
Yeah, we are waiting still to hear numbers from UPMC on exactly the number of people we have here. But I want to make clear one thing that UPMC called me to let me know: the suspect is not here. I talked to Allegheny General Hospital just a second ago, and they tell me that they have 1 patient there being treated. They would not confirm that it was the shooter, but they did indicate that there is 1 patient at Allegheny General Hospital who's being treated. The rest have come to UPMC facilities. Now, again, UPMC issuing a statement just before noon saying that they are treating multiple patients here at UPMC. They're not giving us any indication on the severity of the injuries, but clearly there were a lot of ambulances that arrived here and a lot of police officers has arrived here. Let me step out of the way so you can see what's going on behind me. Most of the ambulances that arrived early on with the victims have now cleared out of here. For the most part, what we have is a heavy police presence. And in fact, I don't know if you can see him at the moment, but there's an officer up there who has a K-9 unit. They're just making sure that this ER area is very secure. And there's a logic to the idea that they would not bring the shooter to the same hospital where the victims came. But again, Allegheny General Hospital is not confirming that the 1 person that they are treating is the shooter. But UPMC has told us very specifically the shooter in this did not come to a UPMC facility. He was taken somewhere else. And of course, AGH is the only other level 1 trauma center here in the Pittsburgh area. Now, UPMC tells us that they are still trying to sort everything out inside. They have apparently a lot of people they're dealing with and a range of injuries, the severity of which they have not revealed to us as yet. But they called everybody and their brother into the emergency room, as they do in a level 1 trauma center in a situation like this, so that they would have multiple people on hand to handle the victims. And at one point, there were quite a few of the medical staff completely gowned with a mask on and everything, standing outside waiting for the next victim to arrive in an ambulance. I will tell you now that that has changed. Everyone is inside at this point. And again, the detectives, in fact, the first vehicle you see there, it looked like it was 3 homicide detectives who got out of it and went inside. A lot of questions to be asked of the victims when they can talk clearly. And we've also seen family members arriving here. I want to go back to something that we mentioned a little bit earlier, where there was a city police car who arrived, lights and sirens. I mean, he was flying. And he came up went directly to the entrance to ER. And he got out, ran around to the other side, and it appeared that he helped a SWAT team member out of the vehicle and inside ER. We could not see at that point any injuries or what exactly the SWAT team officer's situation was, but clearly he was delivered here by a fellow officer. In the foreground, you can see now the police K-9 unit that is walking the area, and the detectives returning to their vehicle as well. The situation here actually is very calm at this point. Most of the, obviously, the activity earlier to bring the victims here has subsided, and now it's just a matter of the professionals of UPMC and their Trauma 1 unit doing what they do to minimize the damage that was done by this shooter. And again, I want to mention again, the shooter apparently was not brought, and in fact, UPMC very specifically called me to say that the shooter was not brought to a UPMC facility, and Allegheny General Hospital confirming just before I came on the air that they are treating one shooting victim at their hospital. And again, I use the word victim because he was wounded. They won't say anything more about that. They say they'll let us know a little bit later on today more information. We're still waiting here at UPMC to hear numbers. How many people were brought here? What was the severity of their injuries? Where are they now in that process of recovery? And as soon as we hear anything, and they're promising to give us information as quickly as they can get it all sorted out, because it's very confusing apparently inside the ER at this hour. As soon as they can get that all sorted out and get us the information, I'll obviously get it to you guys, Ken.
To the unknown number there at UPMC Presbyterian and the one at AGH, are you aware of any victims from Squirrel Hill being treated at any other local hospitals?
That was the indication. According to the spokesperson for Allegheny General, in all of their facilities, they only have one. And UPMC giving the strong indication that most of the victims were brought here, although, again, they have not given us many more specifics other than that. We're just sort of waiting, and I'm watching my phone where I am promised I'll get that information as soon as they're willing to give it out. But clearly, I mean, there are other UPMC hospitals very close by, but this is the Level 1 Trauma Center. This is where they bring the most severely injured. This is where they bring those critical patients, and they literally pull the healthcare professionals from all over the hospital down to ER when a situation happens, so that they have the specialist right there handy who can deal with whatever the circumstance might be, whatever a patient might need. They have the best of care waiting right there at their elbow to be able to get in there and give them the best information. That's what a Level 1 Trauma Center does. That's what they do here at Presby. That's what they do at Allegheny General over on the north side of Pittsburgh as well. And they did. They called everybody in when this happened, prepared to handle as many people who would come. The only question now that we're waiting to hear, Ken and Heather, is exactly how many people are here and how they're doing.
We will check back with you shortly. John, thank you.
And while we were still waiting to hear from local officials, President Trump just tweeted just minutes ago, events in Pittsburgh are far more devastating than originally thought. Spoke with the mayor and the governor to inform them that the federal government has been and will be with them all the way. I will speak to the media shortly and make further statements at the Future Farmers of America. He must be holding some sort of event there later this morning or this afternoon.
And we'll make every effort to bring you those comments live. Just another note, again, because this is in such a busy part of the city, it has wide-ranging effects. Carnegie Mellon University, just blocks away from Tree of Life at Wilkins and Shady, CMU has canceled all university-sponsored activities today. In a note to campus personnel, CMU says that the shooting suspect is in custody. There had been a shelter-in-place order on the campus. That has now been lifted, but again, all activities for today have been canceled. CMU does mention that it has counseling available for anyone who may need it in their campus community at the Counseling and Psychological Services Center.
Okay, so this all began shortly before, around 10 o'clock this morning. Again, still waiting for information on how many people were injured. 8 confirmed fatalities. We are, again, waiting for more information from officials. Megan Schiller is at an area where a lot of the media have gathered and waiting to talk with officials, and she joins us once again live. Megan, do you have any updates for us?
I'm joined right now with Rabbi Chuck Diamond, and we talked with him earlier. However, I don't think any of what he said has made air yet, so we wanted to come back out here live and speak with him. Could you describe your position and when you were with the synagogue?
Yes, I was the rabbi of Tree of Life for the Simcha, which is for 7 years. We were merged together. Before that, I was the rabbi for the Simcha. We shared the building for 3 years.
Where were you when you found out?
I was at home. I live right up the street on I live right up the street around the corner, and I started getting phone calls.
Can you talk about how many rabbis would have been inside around 9:45?
Possibly 3 rabbis. There are 3 congregations who share the building. So there's Rabbi Perlman from New Light, who was in the basement. There's Rabbi Cheryl Klein, who was in the social hall. And there was Rabbi Myers.
We take you now to President Trump.
We'll be going there. I guess some of you will be going with me, and we'll be making a major statement. It's a terrible, terrible thing, what's going on with hate in our country, frankly, and all over the world. And something has to be done. Something has to be done. But it looks like the results are coming in, and they're far more devastating than anybody originally thought in the morning. In the morning, they thought that it was a shooter, but they had the shooter, or they soon would. But the results are very devastating. You're seeing the numbers come in. So we'll be speaking to you at the conference, the Future Farmers of America conference, and it's just a shame to watch this and to see this for so many years. So much of it is absolutely a shame. Do you have any questions?
Mr. President, do you think you need to revisit gun laws? Earlier this year.
You talk up, please.
Gun laws, Mr. President.
Well, again, this has little to do with it. If you take a look, if they had protection inside, the results would have been far better. This is a dispute that will always exist, I suspect. But if they had some kind of a protection inside the temple, maybe it could have been a very much different situation. They didn't. And he was able to do things that, unfortunately, he shouldn't have been able to do. I hear the police were outstanding. I heard the police did an incredible job, and as you know, numerous police were badly injured. But again, law enforcement did a fantastic job. But we're going to have a very complete statement for you. The results are coming in of what took place, how it took place. Again, law enforcement was outstanding, as always. I mean, as usual and as always, law enforcement was really outstanding. They stepped up to the plate. But Pittsburgh, great community, incredible people. I spoke with the governor. I spoke to the mayor. And to see this happening again and again and again is just a shame.
Mr. President, do you think there's anything you can do, because it happens again and again, to end this kind of violence?
Well, it's a violence that's, you look at the violence all over the world. I mean, the world has violence. The world is a violent world. And you think when you're over it, it just sort of goes away, but then it comes back in the form of a madman, a wacko. I think one thing we should do is we should stiffen up our laws in terms of the death penalty. When people do this, they should get the death penalty, and they shouldn't have to wait years and years. Now the lawyers will get involved, and everybody's going to get involved, and we'll be 10 years down the line. And I think they should stiffen up laws, and I think they should very much bring the death penalty into vogue. Anybody that does a thing like this to innocent people that are in temple or in church, we had so many incidents with churches, they should really suffer the ultimate price. They should pay the ultimate price. I felt that way for a long time. Some people disagree with me. I can't imagine why, but this has to stop. So we're going to have a statement at our stop with the young farmers.
Mr. President, towards the beginning of your presidency, you met with the NRA. You said maybe you were the president who could help solve this. Do you see that now as a possibility?
It's a case where, and again, nobody knows exactly what took place yet. It's too soon. But this is a case where if they had an armed guard inside, they might have been able to stop him immediately. So this would be a case for if there was an armed guard inside the temple, they would have been able to stop him. Maybe there would have been nobody killed except for him, frankly. So it's a very, very Very difficult situation, and when you look at it, we can look at it two ways. But again, if they had somebody to protect people. Now, isn't it a shame that you even have to speak that way? Isn't it a shame that we even have to think of that inside of a temple or inside of a church? But certainly the results might have been far better.
That's what I'd like to follow up with you on. Do you think that all churches and synagogues should have armed guards?
I hate to think of it that way. I will say that. I hate to think of it that way. So we'll see you with the future farmers.
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, it's certainly an option. I mean, in this world, this is a world with a lot of problems, and it has been a world with a lot of problems for many years, many, many years. And you could say, frankly, for many centuries. I mean, you look at what goes on. But certainly you want protection, and they didn't have any protection. They had a maniac walk in, and they didn't have any protection, and that is just so sad to see. So sad to see. The results could have been much better. It is a very, it's a very difficult thing for me to stand as president and to watch any of this go. You know, before I ran for office, that I'd watch instances like this with churches and other things. I'd say, what a shame, what a shame. But it's even tougher when you're the President of the United States and you have to watch this kind of a thing happen. It is so sad to see. So we'll see you at the with the young farmers. A lot of them are out there.
Do you think there's anything you can do with the NRA? Earlier this year you said you could
We're always talking. We're always talking to them.
President Trump weighing in there on the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting that has left 8 people dead and multiple injuries more. We know folks have been headed now. The injured have been headed to hospitals in the area. The president weighing in, saying when asked if there should be tougher gun control regulations put into place, the president saying instead that more fatalities could have been prevented at that synagogue if there had been an armed guard in place, and also saying that there should be tougher death penalty laws instead of tougher gun control laws. I'm speaking to Joe Spacek, our producer in the control room. Joe, should we now listen in to our chat earlier with CBS law enforcement and security analyst Paul Violas? The situation seems to have been contained relatively quickly. What is the protocol for a situation like this and this kind of an incident, particularly with a synagogue?
Well, Rena, you mentioned the correct word, and it's containment. The Pittsburgh Police Department.
Paul, unfortunately, you're breaking up. Is there a way that you could stand in one area, Paul? Unfortunately, the line is breaking up.
Can you hear me now, Rena?
Yeah, it's perfect. Great.
Okay, great. You mentioned the correct word. The word is containment, and that's exactly what Pittsburgh PD had to do. That's why they're still clearing buildings. They believe they had one shooter and only one shooter, but they're going to continue to clear buildings to ensure that there was nobody else. That's what they're doing right now, is complete containment.
When the suspect surrenders, which is what police, we believe, happened here, what tactics do you have to take to get someone like this, who, our understanding all morning, he was located on the 3rd floor of this synagogue, communicating with SWAT? We believe he was injured. What happens in that type of situation?
Well, the very first thing that happens is SWAT team has to locate the shooter, which of course they did, and they did so real quickly. But the most important part is isolating the shooter, making sure that he can't or she can't hurt anyone else. Once they close him in, they have to shut off all exits. This person has to feel there's absolutely no way out, and that's exactly what they did, and they did it real quickly. At that point, now they have leverage and they have a bargaining chip in order to get him to surrender, which is exactly what happened.
Paul, I know there are so many people who attend places of worship, synagogues, churches, particularly if you are a parishioner who attends a synagogue. We know NYPD has already upped security at synagogues throughout New York City. What should folks be concerned about, particularly as they worry as they enter a place of worship?
You know, Rena, that's such a really important question, especially now. Hate crimes are up about 12%, and we know over the last 4 years they continue to rise. But specifically as it relates to anti-Semitism, Jews are, over a study the FBI just recently did, Jews account for over 54% of the targets of a hate crime. So, you know, the probability of risk here with hate crimes in the United States has risen dramatically. And your question is poignant, to say the very least. when we start asking ourselves, what do we need to do in order to protect ourselves when we go to a house of worship? That's a frightening question, even though it's one that people keep asking. And it's something that, whether it be a synagogue, a mosque, a church, whatever it may be, it's something that these religious leaders are grappling with right now. I know I work with quite a few of them on a variety of different fronts about security, a balance of security, and providing peace of mind and safety at the same time.
You talk about peace of mind and safety at the same time. You know, we heard from one of the former president of this particular synagogue, the Tree of Life, who had said that they had actually taken precautions. They have a former FBI agent, 20-year veteran, who was giving guidance for all these various synagogues throughout this area. When people employ that sort of thing, we believe that they could have even undergone active shooter training. What do synagogues need to know to be alert in that type of situation?
Well, we would have to know more about this particular situation. And clearly, when you hire someone with that kind of credential, you know that you're going to get really top-shelf counsel. But that still doesn't stop someone, as it appears this individual barges in and starts screaming, you know, all Jews must die, and he's heavily armed. I mean, that's not going to stop that, unless, of course, and Rena, you know, you and I have talked about this before, unless, of course, we go to access control at the front door of all houses of worship and metal detectors. And I don't know that we're going to go there. It's still something that we have to find a balance for, Rena, and we just haven't found that balance yet.
And Paul, when we hear that we have heard the NYPD is fortifying synagogues throughout New York City to make sure parishioners are okay, in that instance, what does NYPD do to make sure they are safe? Well, first part of it, believe it or not, starts with intelligence gathering, and NYPD's intel unit is second to none. I mean, they're phenomenal, and that's gathering information off the internet, off the underground, the darknet, as well as other sources as to any probability of risk that may be brewing at that point in time for that house of worship. And then it's counseling them on proper physical security, proper access control, strategically placing closed-circuit television cameras, incorporating artificial intelligence software so that if there are people that need to be kept out or be aware of, they can do so preemptively, just to name a few. And then working with them on active shooter training and then expeditious evacuation drills that are non-fire related. All of those things are what we see police departments working with the houses of worship on. Based on what we know at this point, which are just reports from our station, our Pittsburgh station, KDKA, we have heard throughout the morning that this was a white male, potentially with a beard, possibly in his 40s at this point, coming from our station there in Pittsburgh. And also shouting out anti-Semitic remarks as he was shooting indiscriminately into the synagogue. What did that tell you? Well, it tells me that it pretty much goes right along the lines of the quintessential profile that fits someone that perpetrates acts of violence such as this, from the age to the race to the gender. We'll probably find out a lot more about him as we move along, bearing in mind, Rena, you know, what we know at this point. Look at the custody police are going to need securing search warrants for the home, vehicle, devices such as laptop and phones to see if he worked with anybody, how he planned it, and who he's affiliated with. All of that's going to be happening right now. At this hour, police are assessing if that synagogue is safe to go back into. We know there was a bris ceremony, a circumcision ceremony for an infant that was expected to take place. 9:45, the services, Shabbat services, were expected to be held. We believe the shooter entered. Early accounts are roughly 9:30 this morning. When we talk about protecting a synagogue like this and this type of a situation, Paul, what is priority number one if you find yourself in something like this? If you're actually there, you know, and this is something that's so important for us to keep our arms around and for our viewers to understand. Active shooters are something that we contend with quite a bit, whether we be at a house of worship or we're in a mall or whatever the case may be. The first step is to try to find a location where you're safe at, where you can at least find cover, not just concealment meaning something to stand behind, but cover, something that will protect you from any kind of line of fire. Turn your cell phone to silent. Make sure that you can't be detected. These are the first two things. Try to find an exit. Third or fourth is if you can evacuate safely, you can ascertain that there's a clear path to evacuate, then take that evacuation route. If it's not clear and safe, then
close yourself in and stay there until you get an all clear from police.
Fascinating to hear you say make sure you seek some sort of shelter and then also to turn your cell phones off.
Yes, well, turn them on silent at least, because the last thing, and I've worked cases like this, Rena, the last thing we want is for somebody to shelter in place, keep their cell phone on, the shooter's still active, and their phone rings. Yeah. So that's it. It's very, very important.
Very, very important to silence your phone. What are we doing?
Anti-Semitic statements saying at one point all Jews must die.
Our CBS Pittsburgh station, KDKA, has been monitoring this situation. We want to bring you back to their live coverage.
That 4 people were shot and killed there, multiple others wounded. In the basement then, another 4 shot and killed, and then more wounded in that location. We understand the gunman went up to the 3rd floor, and that is where he eventually surrendered and was wounded somewhere along that process, described as crawling out in the surrender.
I believe we have Andy Sheehan with us now with some new information. Andy.
Well, Ken, we're still on the scene. Things are kind of winding down around the synagogue. They are searching the building. You know, they are leaving no stone unturned to find out if there was anyone else with this gunman. It is believed at this point that he acted alone and, you know, that he had no other accomplices. I am piecing together information about the gunman. We are identifying him as a Robert Bowers, B-O-W-E-R-S. B-O-W-E-R-S. He is 48 years old. He's a heavy-set white male with a beard. There are Twitter accounts. There was a Twitter account that has been taken down under the name of Robert Bowers. Earlier this morning, he tweeted something about the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which is a Jewish refugee relief organization that brings Jewish refugees to the United States. Under a name of Robert Bowers, there was tweets concerning this organization bringing people into the United States and quote-unquote slaughtering our people. And he ends it off saying, "I am going in." This is under the name of Robert Bowers. Now, this is piecing together from law enforcement sources that this is the name of the gunman who perpetrated this horrific act this morning, who is in police custody. We reported earlier that he shouted anti-Semitic statements, "All Jews must die," and shot indiscriminately into the synagogue, killing at least 8 people, perhaps as many as 11. But it's piecing this together. We see a profile of an anti-Semitic person who took action into his own hands. Apparently very upset about Jewish immigration. Ken?
The location of the suspect right now, do you know where he is?
We do not know where he is. We know that he's in police custody. We don't know whether he was taken to a hospital. He was said to have been injured during this shootout with police on the 3rd floor of the synagogue. We don't know if he was shot or injured some other way, but apparently he was injured, and this prompted the negotiation between the police and himself, and he crawled in towards police and then into custody. We haven't seen him. You know, I understand that law enforcement on the scene did not want him to be photographed, so he was sort of taken out of here surreptitiously to some location, whether that's a police headquarters somewhere or a hospital.
Andy, if we can go by what has happened in other mass shooting situations around the country, I would say it's safe to assume that by now police have been to his home. They probably have his computer. Perhaps there was an effort to make sure that his home wasn't booby-trapped in some way. But all of these things that we've seen in so many other places, we can only assume would be happening with the same type of precautions, the same type of initial investigatory procedures would be happening here.
Well, that's true, and apparently this Twitter account, which I saw earlier like an hour ago, has been taken down. So police are trying to piece together. Would be at his home, wherever that is. We don't know whether he's a resident of the city of Pittsburgh, but this would be sort of the forensic information that they would like to have at this point. Somebody did take this down. It wouldn't have been the gunman himself, so presumably that was law enforcement. But again, this suspect apparently was tweeting this morning about this act. At the end, he said, I am going in. And this would be sort of a premeditated act that he had planned against this synagogue.
All right, Andy, what's the status right now of the officials that we've seen on the scene? From where you are, can you see where the police chief, the mayor, the county executive, does it appear that they're preparing to brief the public?
I am on the other side of things. I'm on Northumberland Street, which would be, south of that, and they would be actually on the north side of it. And there's, this is sort of an 8-block area that's been cordoned off. Almost, I would say probably 5% of the neighborhood of Squirrel Hill now has been cordoned off. And I've not seen the mayor or Rich Fitzgerald or any of those people. They're on the other side of this scene for me. You can see there's a lot of people, a lot of noise still, a lot of hardware and artillery still coming into this area, but it is, a situation where things are being sort of wrapped up, and I think that we'll start getting official confirmation of the information that we've been trying to provide to you, but the information we have so far has been good. And bad at the same time. I mean, it's horrific information that we're getting. At least 8 people dead. I'm told by law enforcement sources that as many as 11 people are dead. 3 police officers have been wounded, and they are doing this investigation now to find out, the motivation of this gunman.
All right, Andy, keep us posted. Thank you.
And we're just getting word from Megan Schiller, who is at an area not far from the synagogue where a lot of the media have gathered, and they are waiting more information from officials who are at the scene. We have just heard that the public safety director for the city of Pittsburgh, Wendell Hisrich, is expected to give an update in roughly 15 to 20 minutes. So we're standing by for that. It's unclear at this point if other officials will join him in that briefing, if we are going to learn more about the injuries to law enforcement and to the people who were congregating in the synagogue this morning.
We have a second tweet this morning as well, from this afternoon, I should say now, from the president. Earlier, he had tweeted that he was watching the events unfolding in Pittsburgh and said he was keeping an eye on things. We have a second tweet, which appears to have been issued right before he took off for Indianapolis and spoke to reporters. The second tweet from the president this morning says, events in Pittsburgh are far more devastating than originally thought. Spoke with mayor and governor to inform them that the federal government has been and will be with them all the way. I will speak to the media shortly and make further statement at Future Farmers of America. So he already did speak to the media and expressed that things would have been different if this synagogue had an armed guard. Pointed out that there was no armed protection at that house of worship this morning, and he is now on his way to Indianapolis, and we expect to hear more from him when he gets to that event with the farmers.
At one point this morning, we did hear that the synagogue may have had their own security, but at this point we do not believe that anyone was armed. Again, this happening around 10 o'clock this morning as services for Shabbat were taking place. Around 9:45 is when they were scheduled to begin. Andy Sheehan was also getting some information that a bris was also scheduled for this morning, and that is a very traditional circumcision ceremony that takes place in the Jewish community. That was also scheduled for today, according to Andy Sheehan. President Trump, when asked about the armed guards, he says, I hate to think of it that way. I hate to think about it that we have to have armed guards in churches, synagogues, and places of worship. But he says that they had a maniac walk in and they did not have any protection. That was something that he said before he boarded Air Force One this morning.
He said this has been a problem for centuries. So more coming from President Trump, more coming from the Pittsburgh Public Safety Director as we continue to watch the situation unfold here in Squirrel Hill, where a suspect is in custody after killing. Our information is at least 8 people at the Tree of Life congregation at Wilkins and Shady, right in the heart of Squirrel Hill this morning as those Sabbath services were underway. The gunman apparently injured, location at this point unknown. Multiple victims injured at least 2 hospitals. The bulk of them appear to be at UPMC Presbyterian Hospital. Family members of those injured have been showing up there as well. We are not getting any information yet on the severity of the injuries and a firm number on how many are being treated.
We also don't know the ages. Were there children at the services? That's something that we still don't know. David Highfield joins part of our live coverage this morning. He is near the scene as well. Good morning. Good afternoon, David.
Yes, Heather and Ken, we are at Shady in Northumberland, just up the street from the Tree of Life Synagogue. And of course, an absolutely horrific situation here. And people in this neighborhood who were told to shelter in place, stay in place earlier, now they are walking around and people are just sort of trying to take in what happened. It's kind of impossible to do that. And I want to bring in someone who lives nearby here, Mindy Kaplan. You're out walking your dog this morning, and you actually found out about this. How?
My son called me from the University of Maryland. I had no idea what was going on. We hear sirens all the time because of the fire station, so I didn't think anything of it, and he called to make sure we were okay. And I said, what do you mean? And he told me what happened. I immediately put the TV on and saw what was going on. I still can't wrap my arms around what's happening here.
You were saying you don't belong to the Tree of Life Synagogue, but you certainly know people that do. What are you thinking this morning? You said you've even heard some possible names of the people that have been killed or wounded.
Absolutely. We do not belong there, but we have a lot of friends and some family members that belong, and you know, we're just starting to hear trickling in of names and, you know, possible injuries, and it's just you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninan. Thank you for joining us. We now have the name of the man who opened fire this morning at a Pittsburgh synagogue. He's 48-year-old Robert Bowers. We'll have more on his history as we learn it. But our Pittsburgh station, KDKA, reports as the gunman opened fire, he yelled, "All Jews must die." The death toll is changing, but several people have been killed. Several others were also wounded in the attack, including 3 police officers who exchanged fire with the suspect before he finally surrendered. This happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. KDKA also reports that those who were killed in the basement of the building and on the main floor. Here's what police said just a short time ago.
The suspect in the shooting is in custody. We have multiple casualties inside the synagogue. We have 3 officers who have been shot. And at this time, we have no more information because we are still clearing the building and trying to figure out if the situation is safe, if there are any more threats inside the building. So that's all we have at this point, but the shooter is in custody. We have multiple casualties and 3 officers shot.
Pat Milton is a senior producer for our CBS News investigative unit, and she joins us now by phone. Pat, what more do we know about this suspect?
Yes, we are learning it's a very fluid situation, but law enforcement sources are telling us that the gunman reportedly shouted anti-Semitic slurs as he was going through his shooting rampage. He was armed with a possible AK-47 assault rifle and 2 pistols. We're also being told that the gunman at one point had barricaded himself in a room inside the synagogue. As you reported, 3 police officers from Pittsburgh City were wounded by the gunman, but none of those injuries are believed at this time to be life-threatening. We have no motive, and we have multiple casualties, but we do not have any firm numbers on the number of people that were killed or injured.
Pat, what are law enforcement saying about where this investigation goes from here? Do they believe it was one suspect who acted alone?
They're not sure at this time. It's a very fluid situation. They have the man in custody, which is a major first step, and now they're trying to find out his background, trying to find out motive, and try to interview him.
And as for folks who may attend synagogues, churches, mosques, places of worship throughout this country, does law enforcement here in New York and around the country believe that they have reason to be concerned?
Yes, there is reason. We know that in New York City, the police department there has secured various locations as a precaution in their synagogues and their houses of worship.
And Pat, at this hour, what are police really zeroing in on at this point?
I guess they're just zeroing in on why he did this, and they're trying to build a case, a fluid case, as to evidence that he is the lone shooter.
All right, our Pat Milton, senior investigative producer from our CBS News investigative unit. Pat, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to take you now to President Trump, who spoke earlier talking about the synagogue shooting situation. He was also asked by reporters as to whether this situation calls for tougher gun laws.
So we've been following very closely the events of Squirrel Hill. I'll be speaking and making a statement at the Farmers of America. You see what we're doing, the Future Farmers. They have the big conference, and we'll be going there. I guess some of you will be going with me, and we'll be making a major statement. It's a terrible, terrible thing, what's going on with hate in our country, frankly, and all over the world. And something has to be done. Something has to be done. But it looks like the results are coming in, and they're far more devastating than anybody originally thought in the morning. In the morning, they thought that it was a shooter, but they had the shooter, or they soon would. But the results are very devastating. You're seeing the numbers come in. So we'll be speaking to you at the conference, the Future Farmers of America conference, and it's just a shame to watch this and to see this for so many years. So much of it is absolutely a shame. Do you have any questions?
Mr. President, do you think you need to revisit gun laws? Earlier this year.
You talk up.
Gun laws, Mr. President.
Well, again, this has little to do with it. If you take a look, if they had protection inside, the results would have been far better. This is a dispute that will always exist, I suspect. But if they had some kind of a protection inside the temple, maybe it could have been a very much different situation. They didn't. And he was able to do things that, unfortunately, he shouldn't have been able to do. I hear the police were outstanding. I heard the police did an incredible job. And as you know, numerous police were badly injured. But again, law enforcement did a fantastic job. But we're going to have a very complete statement for you. The results are coming in of what took place, how it took place. Again, law enforcement was outstanding, as always. I mean, as usual and as always, law enforcement was really outstanding. They stepped up to the plate. But Pittsburgh, great community, incredible people. I spoke with the governor. I spoke to the mayor. And to see this happening again and again and again is just a shame.
Mr. President, do you think there's anything you can do, because it happens again and again, to end this kind of violence?
Well, it's a violence that's, you look at the violence all over the world. I mean, the world has violence. The world is a violent world. And you think when you're over it, it just sort of goes away, but then it comes back in the form of a madman, a wacko. I think one thing we should do is we should stiffen up our laws in terms of the death penalty. When people do this, they should get the death penalty, and they shouldn't have to wait years and years. Now the lawyers will get involved, and everybody's going to get involved, and we'll be 10 years down the line. And I think they should stiffen up laws, and I think they should very much bring the death penalty into vogue. Anybody that does a thing like this to innocent people that are in temple or in church, we had so many incidents with churches, they should really suffer the ultimate price. They should pay the ultimate price. I felt that way for a long time. Some people disagree with me. I can't imagine why, but this has to stop. So we're going to have a statement at our stop with the young farmers.
Mr. President, towards the beginning of your presidency, you met with the NRA. You said maybe you were the president who could help solve this. Do you see that now as a possibility?
It's a case where, and again, nobody knows exactly what took place yet. It's too soon. But this is a case where if they had an armed guard inside, they might have been able to stop him immediately. So this would be a case for if there was an armed guard inside the temple, they would have been able to stop him. Maybe there would have been nobody killed except for him, frankly. So it's a very, very very difficult situation. And when you look at it, we can look at it two ways. But again, if they had somebody to protect people. Now, isn't it a shame that you even have to speak that way? Isn't it a shame that we even have to think of that inside of a temple or inside of a church? But certainly the results might have been far better.
That's what I'd like to follow up with you on. Do you think that all churches and synagogues should have armed guards?
I hate to think of it that way. I will say that. I hate to think of it that way. So we'll see you with the future farmers.
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, it's certainly an option. I mean, in this world, this is a world with a lot of problems, and it has been a world with a lot of problems for many years, many, many years. And you could say, frankly, for many centuries. I mean, you look at what goes on. But certainly you want protection, and they didn't have any protection. They had a maniac walk in, and they didn't have any protection, and that is just so sad to see. So sad to see. The results could have been much better. It is a very, it's a very difficult thing for me to stand as president and to watch any of this go. You know, before I ran for office, that I'd watch instances like this with churches and other things. I'd say, what a shame, what a shame. But it's even tougher when you're the President of the United States and you have to watch this kind of a thing happen. It is so sad to see. So we'll see you at the with the young farmers.
And President Trump now en route to that event. We're going to bring it to you live as soon as we get that. But for now, I want to bring in more about the president's remarks. White House columnist for The Hill, Niall Stanich, he joins me now by phone. Niall, you actually wrote a column looking at the divisiveness in this country, and you said in that article that it precedes President Trump.
It does, certainly. There's no question that there has been increasing polarization in this country dating back decades. Obviously, polarization is one thing. Actual acts of violence of the tragic type we have seen today, Rena, are different, but there is, many people would assert, a connection between the two, and that is where the problem arises.
Now, we heard the president's remarks when he was asked by reporters whether this situation, this fatality, the deaths at the synagogue, should push forward more tougher gun control legislation. And he said no, there should actually be an armed guard inside that synagogue. That would have made a difference. How do you think that's going to be received, particularly by folks of the Jewish faith?
I'm sure that many people will be upset about that. I have seen a number of people on social media and elsewhere talking about the fact that there are many synagogues and other buildings that are in some way related to the Jewish faith that already have armed security guards of some kind. More perhaps specifically to this instance today, obviously we know that 3 police officers were unfortunately shot during this incident in Pittsburgh. So you put those two things together, and I think the point is not so much that it is inherently a foolish or bad idea as the fact that I think it will strike many people as tonally off for something that the president might say in the immediate wake of these events.
Now, we also talk about how one of the reporters actually mentioned it very early on in the president's administration. Many people were hopeful that maybe he would be the one who could work something out with the NRA to deal with gun control. Has that hope completely faded?
Largely, I think it has. I mean, his comments pertaining to armed guards in synagogues today were very parallel to his belief or his call for increasing security in schools after tragedies regarding mass shootings in that regard. So it seems as if he has moved away from the idea of gun control laws.
So what changed, Niall? Do you know why he went from one position to the other?
Well, the NRA certainly exerted its political muscle behind the scenes and publicly, criticizing him for comments that he made that seemed to be advocating for stricter gun laws. I recall there was a meeting at the White House, although the specifics elude me right now, Rena, after which he adopted a much more NRA-friendly position on this issue, frankly.
So does this come down to votes, having the NRA support? Is it that his base really believes so strongly in the Second Amendment they don't want anything curtailing that?
It's a combination, I think, of that belief among his base and the fact that the NRA remains a very well-organized lobby, a very well-organized organization, willing to put considerable money into political races, including, one might add, that it contributed considerable amounts of money to President Trump's initial bid to get elected in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you could hang with us for a second, I want to also bring in Paul Violas. He's a CBS News law enforcement and security analyst. Paul, we know that a suspect has been apprehended, a 48-year-old white male. Jackie, excuse me, we have got a press conference, actually. Paul, if you can stand by just a second, I want to take you here live. And this is, remind me again, Jackie, exactly who we're hearing right now?
For doing what they have done to make us safe and to respond
All right, we're going to listen
quickly, so effectively to this tragedy. And I want to turn it over to Wendell.
Wendell Hesrick, City of Pittsburgh Public Safety Director. As the mayor mentioned, we've had a tragedy here today. The work of the first responders has probably prevented it from becoming much more tragedy than what it is. The scene is very bad inside. There are multiple fatalities. There are at least 6 injuries, to include 4 police officers. The police officers' injuries at this time are non-life-threatening. The other individuals are critical and serious in nature. They were taken to 3 of the level 1, level 2 trauma centers here in the city of Pittsburgh, that being Allegheny General, UPMC, and UPMC Presby and UPMC Mercy. At this time, I'd like to say that we have established a phone number with the assistance of the FBI for any questions from victims' families. That number is 412-432-4400. Once again, it's 412-432-4400. A Victims Assistance and Reunification Center has been set up at Chatham College on Chatham campus at Berry Hall at 106 Berry Street. We will have grief counselors there, as well as the Red Cross. Please allow about a half hour for the final plans on establishment of that center. However, there are individuals working to have it up and running as soon as possible. A further brief press conference will be held at the County Emergency Operations Center at 4 p.m. this afternoon, of which the elected officials and first responders will give you, as well as the FBI, will give you an update. At this time, this is being considered a federal violation, and the primary investigative agency will be the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I would like to personally thank the many first responders that had responded to this incident today, to include the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire, Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, the EMS, Allegheny County Police, and FBI, ATF, and numerous others that I can't even count how many first responders are here that are providing assistance. This will be a lengthy crime scene. We're asking people that don't need to be in this area, please stay away from it, so that both the investigators and first responders can do their job. I will emphasize at this time, there appears to be no active threat to the community. This individual that we believe, the subject that is responsible for this, has been taken in custody. That's all I have.
Can you go over what happened?
I don't. That's going to be part of the investigation.
Can you give the numbers one more time for us? For the injuries.
On the injuries, we believe 6 injuries, 4 of which are police officers. So it's a total of 6 injuries.
How many fatalities?
I will not discuss that yet until we are sure of the number.
It's been reported.
I don't want to get into that at this point.
It's been reported that he screamed, "All Jews must die." Is that true or false?
There's a lot of information. I'd be very cautious on what you hear and what you don't hear at this time. Like I say, we have numerous investigators here. I would ask that if anyone has any information regarding the investigation, that they also call that 412-432-4400, and that will put you in contact with the FBI.
Wendell, can you tell us what the situation was in there? How many people about were inside?
I don't have that
Was
answer.
a service going on?
I do not want to give you, my understanding was there was a service occurring.
Has the security measures been lifted? Can people in Squirrel Hill leave their houses?
That is correct. However, we are setting up a very hard perimeter around the crime scene, and we ask individuals to stay away from that. So there will be a very secure presence around the crime scene just to protect the integrity of the investigation.
The person taken into custody, any weapons recovered off this person?
I don't want to get into that.
You believe he acted alone, 100%?
I don't want to get into that. Right now, what we have is one subject in custody from the scene. Whether or not, as all these investigations, we have to look into every imaginable fact to find out if there is anyone else that's been involved in it.
Is there any evidence of a bomb?
I'm sorry?
Is there any evidence of a bomb?
There is not. Explosive ordnance disposal teams went through the scene, and there is no evidence of any IEDs or any further threat.
Wendell, for a moment there, you sounded very emotional. Hand was placed on your shoulder. Tell me how you feel right now.
It's a very horrific crime scene. It's one of the worst that I've seen, and I've been on some plane crashes. It's very bad. All right,
What's his identity?
I do not want to get into that. Like I say, there's a very active investigation going on right now.
Have you identified him?
I'm sorry?
Who are we going to hear from at 4 o'clock?
You will hear from myself, the SAC, Special Agent in charge of the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, as well as the elected officials.
A lot of moving parts today. What's the next step here?
The next step is secure the crime scene. The FBI has both assets from both Western Pennsylvania and from D.C. en route here, so they will be running the investigation and the crime scene with the support of both the Allegheny County Police and the City of Pittsburgh Police.
Did the shooter actually attend the synagogue at any?
I have no idea. I'd like to also mention the state police. They've been instrumental in helping us out as well.
Just to be clear, is it 6 people or at least 6?
As far as the injuries, right now we're at 6 injuries.
Did you identify the gunman?
It's an active investigation. I mean, obviously we know who the gunman is, but I'm not going to bring that up now.
Why are the feds conducting the investigation?
As I mentioned before, this falls under a hate crime, being it's a Jewish synagogue, so it will be basically a federal investigation with the assistance of the locals, county, and state police.
Is the shooter among those injured?
The shooter was taken to the hospital, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm still out here.
It's a very horrific crime scene. It's one of the worst I've seen. And I've been on plane crashes. It's very bad. Those were the words from Wendell Hisrick. He's the Pittsburgh Public Safety Director. He made those comments when asked why his voice was cracking. He was emotional. An official put their arm on his shoulder. This dovetails with what the president has said when the president earlier said it is far worse than we expected. I want to bring in Paul Violas. He's a CBS News law enforcement and security analyst. He joins us now. Paul, we're talking about the aftermath of this crime scene. You just heard that public official say that. Paul, can you hear me?
Rena?
Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Rena, yes, go ahead.
I was just saying that we heard the description from the head of Pittsburgh Public Safety saying it is very horrific, this crime scene, one of the worst. And he said, I have worked on plane crashes before. Can you walk us through exactly what investigators might be dealing with on the ground inside that synagogue?
I can tell you right now that, well, from 2 perspectives, Rena, and I think to quickly piggyback on something that was said when someone commented to the Director of Public Safety that he was emotional. I will tell you that 38 years of doing this, if you've lost the ability to get emotional when you look at something like that, you've lost the humanity that you need in order to have that position. So that's quite common and to be expected. I applaud him for showing that during this particular time. It's composed and straight and direct. What investigators are doing right now, Rena, is preparing for court. They are making sure that crime scene is immaculate. It is non-compromised. There is no way of contaminating any of the evidence whatsoever. They've contained it by creating a very solid perimeter. There'll be a uniformed officer at the entryway to that crime scene, and absolutely no one, and I mean no one, will come into that crime scene unless they have a reason to be there. They'll have crime scene techs that will be placing evidence markers around the entire area, And if there's more than one crime scene, meaning if it occurred on different levels, they'll be doing the same thing. So they're sealing everything off. Now they have to make sure, think of like a clean room. They're going to make sure that they don't contaminate the crime scene. So they're going to protect every fiber, every shell casing, everything to ensure that when this goes to court, that a good, solid defense attorney won't be able to kick this case because of a compromise in the crime scene. That's what's going on right now as we speak inside that building.
What is so tragic and horrific part of this is that this was a place of worship. It was where these parishioners were attending Shabbat services, and there was also a bris, which is a circumcision ceremony. It usually takes place in the first week of life for babies. There could have been more people here. We don't even know the age, were there children involved? And to hear that public safety director say that it is absolutely horrific inside this synagogue. How do you protect yourself? Because I know folks who might be attending churches, mosques, synagogues are wondering, am I safe in this country to take my family to a place of worship?
Rena, that is the question that we have been grappling with now, and you and I have covered a number of incidences such as this over the last several years. That is the question that everybody's grappling with. I never openly, try to criticize the sitting president, but in listening to that soundbite, I think it really is important to say and to go on record, and I'm saying this, that we cannot put this on the officials at the synagogue as if to say if there was armed security in there, this wouldn't have happened, it would have been less. We don't know that. And this is a tragedy. They are the victims, and we simply cannot put this on them. So I just want to start by saying that. The second thing, Rena, coming back to your question, is we have to make a decision. We all, whether we're going to a mosque, whether we're going to a synagogue or a temple, a church, whatever house of worship that we are blessed enough to go to, we have to come to a decision. That is, how much security do we want? How much security do we need? Are we going to incorporate that in our limited budgets? How are we going to assess what our level of risk is? And at the end of the day, Rena, and this is a question for all of our viewers and any listeners that will listen as well, do we want to put metal detectors at the front of our entryway? Do we want to see armed security and armed law enforcement inside our houses of worship to protect us? That, Rena, is the question.
Paul, you know that there are many people throughout the country who are former law enforcement, and they help with security, securing areas, offices, places of worship. What should folks be doing, even if you have a place of worship that might have a total of 5 people attending? How do you protect yourself?
That's a good question. The first thing that I always suggest to clients is try to have somebody that works for the church check social media just to make sure that, and you can do this very easily, to make sure that there isn't someone disgruntled or someone that's saying anything against A, your particular religion, or B, your particular house of worship. Because, as Mary Ellen pointed out earlier, and she's as good as they come, people broadcast. They boast about get-even plans. They talk about things before they do them, and oftentimes it's done in social media. So step one in protecting yourself, have someone inside your house of worship monitor social media chatter to see preemptively if you have a problem. The second thing is church councils need to start to look at preemptive measures in protecting their house of worship, and that could be either A, incorporating closed-circuit television cameras outside, or B, actually having someone that's that's present during their services, that's armed. It can be someone that's not necessarily in uniform. It could be an usher that's professionally trained and certified in law enforcement, but that's the next step that I believe that we're going to take, is having someone dressed as, a parishioner and someone that's attending, but armed in the event, God forbid, something like this were to happen.
Paul, you always worry about copycats. We were talking about this with the bombing, the bombs that were mailed throughout this country from east to west coast to high-level Democratic officials. I want to ask you, when we talk about something like this, what's the fear about copycat crime, somebody else who becomes motivated maybe somewhere else in the country? High probability, Rena, and the reason for that is because the behavioral makeup or the pedigree of this particular individual is someone that seeks attention, and they get attention. This individual is getting a lot of attention. And as I mentioned before, and I quickly want to reiterate, it's important for us to understand the empirical data behind this is that hate crimes have increased steadily over the last 4 years. We had a 12% jump from last year to this year, and
54% of that's being targeted towards Jewish people. So, we have a high probability of risk here. We understand that. And it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that we start incorporating more preemptive measures. When we look at the attention that these guys are getting from things like this, the next guy that's watching, an iconic network like CBS and CBSN that's going to cover something like this triggers this internal note to them to say, well, wait a second. If I do this, then I'll get the same attention. Yesterday we didn't know this guy existed, and by the end of the day today, Rena, the entire world's going to know his name.
I know you build profiles on these types of people in particular. What makes somebody come into an innocent place of worship where people were doing nothing more than practicing their faith and cause them to indiscriminately shoot into the building, into people, savagely, viciously, and throwing out slurs?
Well, Rena, the thing to remember is that no one ever just snaps. This happens over a long period of time, and they tell people about it. We see this behavior mature over a period of years. Sometimes it starts with the way they were brought up and the manner in which right and wrong was defined in their house, or if they had a predetermined hatred while they were growing up against certain types of groups or colors, etc. That's really kind of metastasized as people grow older and they start to align with certain groups. As we saw, and I believe you and I covered Charlottesville together, we saw the same exact thing, the same exact hate that grew in Charlottesville. This is something that's growing in our country, and it's growing at a record pace right now. I mean, this is something we really need to pay attention to.
You talk about the Jewish community in America. Remind me again of the study. Why do you believe that this is such a focal point when it comes to hate crimes?
I think that anti-Semitic behavior has been, or should have been, but has been a large concern statistically, empirically in the United States. We just don't pay enough attention to it, and that's the unfortunate truth. But anti-Semitic treatment and anti-Semitic hate crimes have been the focal point for many years.
Paul Violas, I want to thank you very much. CBS News security consultant, law enforcement authority. Thank you very much for joining us, Paul.
My pleasure, Rena.
I want to take you to Israel. Shabbat has ended, the Sabbath has ended, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the shooting today. Let's listen in.
I was heartbroken and appalled by the murderous attack on the Pittsburgh synagogue today. The entire people of Israel grieve with the families of the dead. We stand together with the Jewish community of Pittsburgh. We stand together with the American people in the face of this horrendous anti-Semitic brutality. And we all pray for the speedy recovery of the wounded.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I want to return you now to our CBS Pittsburgh station, KDKA. They are monitoring the situation. This is their live coverage.
I moved here in 1960. I'm concerned they're in their 80s. I'm concerned for a lot of older people that don't turn inside more than they need to when this happens. And hopefully the next few days things will slowly return to the best they can.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, so, I mean, just people are in shock, and, gratefully people are, coming together tonight. There'll be different services at different synagogues, the community coming together in mourning, in sorrow, and I think in resolve, that they are a strong community here, and that life will go on after this horrific tragedy. As you can see, things are sort of breaking down here. Traffic starting to loosen up. The presence, this has sort of been almost an armed military presence that has taken over this neighborhood that's beginning to dissipate right now. And we will stay on scene and give you more updates as we go along. Back to you.
Andy, thanks so much. Very moving to hear from the public safety director this morning. At first, just saying the scene inside is very bad, and then when questioned further, he said, I've been to plane crashes, and this is horrific, one of the worst things he's ever seen. This is hitting hard, not only for those who are in that neighborhood, but for those who have to respond to this and have to break the news to those who have lost loved ones, those who have to care for the victims, the 4 police officers who were injured. So many repercussions coming from this, and it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. We are still waiting to learn more about the suspect, who's been identified as Robert Bowers, according to our sources.
And just one additional piece of information, that he's from Castle Shannon.
Reportedly from Castle Shannon. Yeah, that's something new that's coming in that we're just learning, is he's from Castle Shannon. And again, we don't know for certain right now if the shooter was taken to one of the 3 hospitals where victims are being treated. We know that UPMC Presbyterian is treating a few patients, AGH also treating 1, UPMC Mercy treating 1. We were told that 6 people were injured, including 4 police officers. We believe that the suspect was also injured, so that would definitely add up to the numbers that we're hearing.
All right, you may have missed this earlier, but President Trump commented on what's happening in Pittsburgh this morning as he was getting ready to leave the White House for a visit to Indiana. We have a video of that right now. We can show that to you. All right, we'll attempt to bring that to you in a moment. But the president spoke as he was leaving for Indianapolis, and he promised further comments once he arrived in Indianapolis to speak with the young farmers group. But here's the president on his way to Indianapolis this morning.
So we've been following very closely the events of Squirrel Hill. I'll be speaking and making a statement at the Farmers of America. You see what we're doing, the Future Farmers. They have the big conference, and we'll be going there. I guess some of you will be going with me, and we'll be making a major statement. It's a terrible, terrible thing, what's going on with hate in our country, frankly, and all over the world. And something has to be done. Something has to be done. But it looks like the results are coming in, and they're far more devastating than anybody originally thought in the morning. In the morning, they thought that it was a shooter, but they had the shooter, or they soon would. But the results are very devastating. You're seeing the numbers come in. So we'll be speaking to you at the conference, the Future Farmers of America conference, and it's just a shame to watch this and to see this for so many years. So much of it is absolutely a shame. Do you have any questions?
Mr. President, do you think you need to revisit gun laws? Earlier this year.
Talk up, please.
Gun laws, Mr. President.
Well, again, this has little to do with it. If you take a look, if they had protection inside, the results would have been far better. This is a dispute that will always exist, I suspect. But if they had some kind of a protection inside the temple, maybe it could have been a very much different situation. They didn't. And he was able to do things that, unfortunately, he shouldn't have been able to do. I hear the police were outstanding. I heard the police did an incredible job. And as you know, numerous police were badly injured. But again, law enforcement did a fantastic job. But we're going to have a very complete statement for you. The results are coming in of what took place, how it took place. Again, law enforcement was outstanding, as always. I mean, as usual and as always, law enforcement was really outstanding. They stepped up to the plate. But Pittsburgh, great community, incredible people. I spoke with the governor. I spoke to the mayor. And to see this happening again and again and again is just a shame.
All right, the president there speaking after he spoke is when we got confirmation that this is now a federal investigation and considered a hate crime.
That's because it falls under the hate crime category. FBI is now taking over. We expect to hear from the FBI around 4 o'clock, but right now we want to bring in Pam Serrano. She is at Allegheny General Hospital, where we know at least one victim is being treated.
Yes, Heather and Ken, we are at AGH, and we also want to note here that KDKA-TV has received multiple reports. They are unconfirmed reports, but from various reliable sources, that the shooter may be here at the hospital. So I'm going to go ahead and let Rob Hobson, my photographer, go ahead and zoom in over my shoulder here. First, let's go ahead and look at one of the entrances to the parking garage at Allegheny General Hospital. Clad in dark colors, you can see see that there is a security guard there at the entrance to one of the parking lots here at Allegheny General Hospital on the north side, almost as if he is guarding the entrance there. We were at Major Crimes earlier and were not even allowed into the building, which is not necessarily standard protocol there, although that door always remained locked. And I did just speak to someone who came out of Allegheny General Hospital. She was here visiting a loved one, and she said, as she quotes, that security was going nuts inside of Allegheny General Hospital, that there were guards running around with walkie-talkies, and she took some photographs that she shared with us and we sent to our newsroom as well. Not sure if we will have those available to you during this first report, but they showed at least a dozen police cars as she was shooting down with her camera, her cell phone camera, from a hospital room inside Allegheny General Hospital. And you can't see it from our vantage point, but from her vantage point inside AGH, you could see almost a dozen police cars from the window there, and also people coming out of those police cars into the hospital. Again, we don't know, in fact, if the shooter of the synagogue is here, but we are receiving multiple reports that he may, in fact, be here. So we will stay on top of this story from this angle to bring you the latest. I was actually, just as a quick side note, at St. Paul's Cathedral in Oakland, not far from Squirrel Hill, of course, for the noon mass, and you could hear the police cars just zooming past St. Paul's Cathedral, and the priest there during our services offering up prayers for those who were killed today, and ending with, "Have mercy on us all." So that is the latest right now from Allegheny General Hospital on the north side. Pam Serrano, KDKA TV. Heather and Ken, back to you.
Pam, thank you. And we can just add to that we had word from UPMC via John Shumway that the suspect is not at a UPMC facility, which lends credence to what we're hearing from our sources about AGH. But we also heard from the public safety director that there was at least an additional victim, perhaps more, at UPMC Mercy Hospital.
That's right. We believe at least one person treated at Mercy, one at AGH, and 4 at UPMC Presbyterian Hospital. His search would not say if the shooter was injured or the severity of the injured, but when we were getting some initial reports around 11 o'clock this morning, about an hour after all of this unfolded, it was reported that he was crawling on the 3rd floor. That's where he was eventually pinned in the Tree of Life synagogue. And when we say pinned, police were able to surround him, get him to surrender in that location on the 3rd floor, and take him into custody. We do not know how he was injured, if it was officers returning fire. We're unsure, because at this point it has not been released by officials.
And 2 other new pieces of information that we got from the public safety director that we haven't commented on is that he confirmed on camera for the first time that the suspect was injured in this confrontation with officers.
He did.
And he also upped the number of police officers injured. We had been under the impression it was
3.
Now we understand a 4th Pittsburgh police officer. Actually, we don't even know that. We know that a 4th police officer, multiple agencies involved.
Responded.
We know that a 4th law enforcement officer has now was injured, and again, those are among 6 total injuries, and there is no official confirmation from officials on the record as to the number of fatalities.
That's right.
They're holding off. What you're seeing on your screen is what we have been told by solid, credible, reliable sources. That's solid information. The city is giving way in this investigation to the FBI. Therefore, there's some reluctance to get into the details of what happened, to get into too much of it, because this will be handled by the FBI, the U.S. Attorney. But this information that you're seeing is what KDKA TV has confirmed, as well as the name of the suspect, Robert Bowers, age 48, from Castle Shannon. Great work being done this morning by our team out there in Squirrel Hill, Andy Sheehan, Megan Schiller, David Highfield, and we continue to follow every detail. And you're watching it raw. You understand that as you watch an event like this, there may be conflicting information early on, but as we stay with the story, as we continue to reconfirm information, the picture becomes more clear. And once again, once we get that federal briefing from the investigators who are handling this, who are in charge of this hate crime investigation, we will have much more confirmed on the record, on camera.
So the 4 police officers who were injured, just to let you know, one thing that we did get out of that press briefing is that the injuries to those officers are non-life threatening. However, we do understand that several people are currently in surgery at UPMC Presbyterian Hospital. That's why we want to bring in John Shumway once again. He is live at Presby. He may have an update for us. John?
Yeah, Heather and Ken, let's talk about these numbers for a second, because in dissecting the numbers that we know of, it would appear that when Wendell Hesrich said that there were 6 people injured, and 4 of them being police officers, that in that 6 people injured, he was not counting the shooter, because UPMC has given us a counting of 6 people. So let's run over that again. UPMC currently has 4 victims that they are treating here at Presby. Now, 3 of them are in surgery, and 1 is in stable condition awaiting surgery. So that's the 4 that they are currently treating. A 5th was here at Presby, what was treated and released. And then a 6th patient is at UPMC Mercy at their level 1 trauma center. Came through there on the way to surgery and is currently in surgery. So if you take those numbers and understand that Wendell Hesrich said that we're talking about 6 people injured and 4 of them being police officers, it only stands to reason that some of the people who are in surgery here or awaiting surgery are indeed police officers. So we'll wait to hear more on their conditions. Meanwhile, the 1 person, as you heard from Pam, who was taken to Allegheny General Hospital, I don't believe was in Wendell Hesrich's count, because that is apparently the shooter, and his condition, as we have heard, AGH isn't commenting on. They're going to wait and leave law enforcement to let us know about that. But we know that there are 4 patients currently in surgery, 3 here, 1 at Mercy, and then another patient waiting to go into surgery. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, going into surgery does not necessarily reflect the severity of a patient's condition. It merely means that surgery is necessary to mitigate the damage that has been done. And it was certainly good news to hear from Wendell Hesrich that as far as the police officers go, none of the injuries are life-threatening. We obviously don't know the extent of the injuries to the other people who have been brought in here. So those are the numbers as we have them right now. It's going to sort itself out as the day goes on, but we do know 6 outside of Allegheny General Hospital are being treated. So it looks like with the shooter included, it's a total of 7 people.
Very helpful, John. Thank you for that. Let's return now to Squirrel Hill and Andy Sheehan. Andy, what's the latest you're hearing?
Can you hold that up?
Andy Sheehan, are you with us?
Okay, so we are back here. We're at Northumberland. And, are we on? Go. Oh, sorry. We are back here at Northumberland and Shady. You see that things are kind of winding down here as far as the police perimeter and the activity here at Northumberland and Shady. We are trying on the spot here to try to put together information about the suspect, the gunman here that burst into the synagogue shortly before 10 a.m. this morning and shot up the synagogue, killing as many as 11 people. We're identifying him as a Robert Bowers, and today we have found some Twitter posts from Robert Bowers prior to the shooting here that were posted this morning. One is seems to indicate a contempt for an organization called the Hebrew International Aid Society, which promulgates Jewish refugee resettlement in the United States from around the world. And I'm going to read this tweet from the suspect. HIAS likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. Screw the optics. I'm going in. Now, this would have been posted just about an hour before the suspect went into the Tree of Life synagogue this morning and shot up the Shabbat services and other services going on at the time, killing a confirmed at least 8 people, perhaps as many as 11 people. He, according to law enforcement sources, he was shouting, "All Jews must die," in shooting up the synagogue. There's another tweet that Robert Bowers showed this morning. It says, "Jews are the children of Satan. again, you know, obviously, if he is, and we are being told by law enforcement sources that he is the suspect, we're told that he is a resident of Allegheny County, perhaps of the North Hills, and that he obviously is a person of very strong anti-Semitic leanings, who has taken it under his power with heavy artillery to go and shoot up this synagogue this morning. Again, we're piecing together information about this suspect. The public safety director, Wendell Hisrich, will only confirm that he has been taken into custody and that he was taken to a hospital. We're told that, you know, he had been pinned down on the 3rd floor of the synagogue, exchanged gunfire with police officers, and was injured. We don't know the extent of his injuries and whether, in fact, he was shot. But that he did have a negotiation after being injured with police, crawled to police, and he was taken into custody. And according to Safety Director Hisrich, he is now at a hospital. You know, at this point, law enforcement will be going to his home, wherever that may be, perhaps potentially in the North Hills. They will be doing a forensic investigation on his computer. These tweets that we were able to secure this morning, get some screenshots of, his Twitter account has been taken down, so that is the substance of that is in the possession of law enforcement, and forensic scientists will be going over that information. So again, we are here, we are in Squirrel Hill, a neighborhood in shock and in mourning right now for this horrific crime this morning, this mass murder. Safety Director Hisrich, an FBI veteran, said that he was quite shaken by the scene, had never seen a scene like it, even though he had been on the scene of fatal airline crashes. You know, that this is just a horrific action of what you might call domestic terrorism. I'll be back here reporting. Now back to you.
Andy, if a gunman is in custody, if a suspected gunman is in custody, you might assume. All right. All right, I'm told Andy doesn't have an audio connection, so we will get back to him later. But we have some more information about these online messages. Right. Andy's referring to them as tweets. They look like tweets.
Very much so.
But they may not be.
But
they don't appear to be.
From what we understand, there's a social media site called Gab, a network called Gab, G-A-B capitalized. And this is very similar to Twitter. The layout is very similar to Twitter. According to some of the very quick research we were able to do on Gab, it is classified as a place where you can have free speech. I still have Robert Bauer's page pulled up before it was taken down. We still have access to it because it's still on our computer screen here. Looks like he joined in January of 2018. We were able to capture some of those posts before the page was removed. And again, we don't know by whom, if it was by authorities. This is just kind of a glimpse into some of the stuff that he has posted.
Now, Twitter and other social media sites have been very active in trying to remove what they consider hate speech or certain types of offensive material. So perhaps this is material that might not have been allowed to remain on Twitter and therefore ended up on this other site called Gab. But again, this is the person we believe to be the suspect, injured and in custody at this hour, 48-year-old Robert Bowers. Some conflicting information now on where he's from. Andy indicating perhaps North Hills. We had information it was Castle Shannon. But again, forgive us, there's often conflicting information as we are in the raw stages of gathering this information, and we will clarify that as soon as we can.
Well, and Ken, you and I were speaking earlier about this. Certainly one community knows where Robert Bowers lives because surely there is a police presence there right now.
Good point.
Oftentimes in the immediate moments after, while first responders are still working and that suspect has been identified, long before we know the name of that individual, police are already responding to that home to make sure there is no additional threat.
That's an excellent point. And again, we are going to get more information on this, but it takes time. So we had the initial briefing from the city of Pittsburgh. We heard from the governor, but this is a federal case. This is a federal hate crime investigation. In about a little over 2 hours, we expect to have a briefing from the FBI. In the meantime, people with information that they would like to communicate to the FBI are invited to call a phone number that I'll give you in just a moment. The same phone number can also be called by people with any questions about the victims at Tree of Life this morning. It's on your screen. They're calling it a victims assistance hotline, but again, it's also for those who want to get information to investigators. 412-432-4400. The police also letting us know that an assistance center has been set up on the campus of Chatham University, which is very close there in Squirrel Hill, at Berry Hall. They're offering grief counselors and assistance from the Red Cross. There are no doubt people displaced from their homes right now due to this scene that has been cordoned off, and that's someplace people can go for help.
Following this shooting, as police were just responding...
Can we ask the, what are we looking at here?
This appears to be right over, and I don't know, could that possibly be the suspect's vehicle?
This is from earlier.
This is from earlier. This is from right outside the synagogue. Okay. Right after the shooting took place, as police were still responding and people could still hear gunfire, the area surrounding the synagogue, and this is right at the intersection of Wilkins and Shady Avenue in Squirrel Hill, that area was put on lockdown. I've been reading some posts from people on Twitter and on Facebook. People at coffee shops and restaurants were sheltered in place. Stores were locked. People were terrified. No one had any idea what was going on. We've since learned the horrific details about what actually took place inside Tree of Life Synagogue this morning.
We've been describing the scene there at Tree of Life. Sabbath services, Shabbat services underway on a Saturday morning. 3 separate congregations use that building. In addition to Tree of Life, New Light congregation meets there and has services, as does a smaller congregation called Dor Hadash. Dor Hadash has just sent a note, an email to its congregants. I want to read that for you. It says, "We wanted to let you know that as soon as we have some information regarding this morning's event, we will be in touch with you." Again, this is an email from Dor Hadash to its congregants, not all of whom, of course, would have been at the services this morning. An additional note, it says, "Please know you can go to the JCC, where grief counselors will be available, as well as members of the congregation." So again, that's for one of the 3 congregations that meets at Tree of Life, known as Dor Hadash.
So there are 3 different congregations inside Tree of Life.
Yes.
So Dor Hadash is one of them, Tree of Life, and the New Light,
yes,
which was in the basement. We understand that the suspect barged into the synagogue, kicked in the door, and began to open fire on all 3 levels of the synagogue.
All right, I believe we're going to go to
Bishop David Zubik.
All right, we have Bishop David Zubik on the phone with us. Bishop, are you there?
Do you want me to come there first? Are you still up at the site? Or?
All right, let's take a moment, get our ducks in a row here, and we will bring you some comments this morning from Bishop David Zubik, and then we also have a lot is in motion this morning. The president will be speaking shortly, we understand, from Indianapolis, where he intends to have another statement on what happened in Squirrel Hill. We'll attempt to bring you that as well.
A lot of people sending their thoughts and prayers, a lot of statements coming in from officials across the state and across the country, different organizations, but we also received notice about blood donors needed, and this came in a short time ago. Vitalent, it's the formerly Central Blood Bank, has provided blood to the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center hospitals in anticipation of the increased need, and they are asking specifically for O positive, O negative, and platelet donations. They are needed the most, but of course anybody that can give, they are asking that you do.
That's important information. We also have a comment coming in now from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Quote, "I was heartbroken and appalled by the murderous attack on a Pittsburgh synagogue." He says all of Israel is grieving with the families of the dead. He adds, "We stand together with the Jewish community of Pittsburgh. We stand together with the American people in the face of this horrendous anti-Semitic brutality, and we will pray for the speedy recovery of the wounded."
Powerful statements there, and we want to try and thank you very much for being patient with us in this very fluid situation. We want to attempt to bring in Bishop David Zubik once again. Bishop, are you with us?
I am with you, Heather. Thanks.
Please share your thoughts this morning, Bishop.
Oh, I mean, these things are always so tragic, but when they come so close to home, it just really pierces the heart. And I just am so much praying for all the members of the Jewish community, for sure, who are suffering so much with this horrific tragedy today.
I don't know if you heard, we had an interview earlier with the former rabbi of the congregation, and he was asked if this was the kind of thing that he ever thought about when he was presiding over services. He said he thought about it all the time. What do you make of that?
Well, sad to say, I think some of the incidences that have happened over the course of the last 5 years, you do worry about that. You know that this random violence takes place, almost daily, and when it happens so close to home, you really hope that something can happen amongst us as members of society, that we can stop the hatred and stop the violence.
Bishop, President Trump spoke a short time ago before he boarded Air Force One to head to Indianapolis. He was asked about armed security guards in houses of worship, and he said, "I hate to think of it that way, but they had a maniac walk in and they did not have any protection." Has that ever crossed your mind, adding armed security to your churches, your parishes?
Well, I think, obviously that's a discussion that's happening in schools and every area. It seems to me we have to work at the root cause of violence, and that's what we have to pay special attention to make sure that we start to work on finding ways that we can resolve this kind of violence and this kind of hatred.
Bishop, this happened in a house of worship where people are coming together on a Saturday morning, looking to do good in the world, looking for community, looking for a sense of belonging, looking for spirituality. You have consoled people in, I'm sure, many instances where tragedy has occurred. What can you say to the people who have been touched by this? What can those of us who may not have a direct connection do to ease their pain on a day like this?
Well, we have to stand with each other and share, not only our sympathy but our empathy. I think also as people of faith, we have to also join our hands and hearts in prayer as well, too.
And Mass begins in the Catholic churches around 5 o'clock. Are there any special services planned for this evening?
Well, what I've done is I've asked all of our pastors to, at every Mass this weekend, to make sure that they purposely invite all the faithful to be able to pray for our Jewish sisters and brothers.
Bishop, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just heart goes out again. Everybody who's part of the Jewish community, they're such wonderful people.
All right, Bishop David Zubik, thank you for that. We continue to follow the developments as we near 2 p.m. We'll give a wrap-up in a couple of minutes, but before we do, let's, not a wrap-up, I should say, we'll bring you up to speed on information you may have missed. But before we do that, let's go to Andy Sheehan quickly.
So, was there a bris there today?
It was a baby name.
Baby name.
Hello?
Not yet.
Go? Okay. Hi, we are back here now we are at Shady and Northumberland, about a block away from Tree of Life Synagogue. I am here with Alvin Birkin, who is the Rabbi Emeritus of Tree of Life, and also the only Jewish police chaplain. So, Rabbi, my condolences for what has happened this morning.
Thank you, Andy. I'm in a state of shock, absolute shock.
And the neighborhood, the congregation and the neighborhood's in shock.
Absolutely. This is a peaceful place. And this happened in a place where I have spent every Saturday morning for the last 35 years. And my wife was sick this morning and asked me to please stay home.
Please stay home.
Yeah.
And what do you know of what happened?
I really only know from news reports. I just found out that one of our regular attendees, was shot and killed. So I'm just in a matter of shock right now.
So I understand that people are meeting over at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center. That's where families are going now, and they will be apprised of the condition of their loved ones if they have been shot or wounded?
Right, that's where I'm headed.
You're headed there.
Yeah.
And you're also a police chaplain. Are you?
I am. So this zone here, Zone 4, which is right here, is where I serve, and also we serve in general to help the police do their job. And today they went beyond the call of duty. I understand that 3 of them are pretty badly wounded.
And I understand that if the police had not acted, this terrible tragedy would have been worse than what it is.
Right. Last I heard was that before they caught him, he was sequestered in my office, which is up on the 3rd floor.
Can you describe that to me?
Well, I could almost see it from where we are. It's a beautiful study, and on the 3rd floor, it's sort of quiet and peaceful. I overlook Wilkins Avenue, so I see where the action is. But this is an unbelievable event. Unbelievable.
He was behind your desk, I guess.
He may have to barricade himself, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't. They wouldn't let me in now to see it, so okay. I don't really know.
And it's shocking. I mean, as a rabbi, you know that anti-Semitism exists, but and you're probably on guard about that.
We actually do hire off-duty police for the high holidays, which was a few weeks ago. But on a normal weekend, we don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, the president had a statement today about, well, had there been an armed guard?
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. Do you think there should have been? Or?
Well, every level of security helps. So I think an armed guard, sadly, I've been in Israel over the last 50 years, and Israel takes these precautions very seriously.
How shocking is it that this happened in this neighborhood of Squirrel?
This is a remarkable neighborhood. We are within the city limits of Pittsburgh. Very peaceful, very beautiful. Old trees, old buildings. It's really an amazing neighborhood to raise a family in, which is what I did. So it's distressing on many, many levels.
I'm a resident of Squirrel Hill. I'm a Catholic. Jews, Catholics, Asians. We're a diverse neighborhood now, and we all get together.
I just got off the phone with Cardinal Wuerl, who reached out to me, which was very kind considering the troubles he's having. But we're old friends.
What will you be counseling people, and especially the police officers? The police officers are shook up.
Of course. They just need to know that the community is with them. And we are grateful to them for the fact that they put their lives on the line every single day. I'm a former Navy chaplain, so I have a little experience in terms of military. But this event is just beyond comprehension.
What do you tell your congregation? What do you tell police officers?
They just have to do the best they can for everybody, and including themselves. I have no magic bullet, you'll pardon the expression, to make the pain go away.
No. And we will, this is forever change, this neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's true. We'll always be referred to as the neighborhood where a shooting took place. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
So, just devastatingly tragic incident today that, as the rabbi said, will forever scar and forever, identify this neighborhood as a place where this terrible mass shooting took place. Back to you.
I heard from a rabbi, and moments before that, bishop, and neither can really explain. You can't begin to explain.
We want to interrupt to take you to Las Vegas. Vice President Mike Pence spoke about the deadly synagogue shooting just moments ago.
Crescent Hardy back to the United States Congress. Thank you all for being here today. Before I get started, let me address an issue I know is on all of our minds and all of our hearts. This morning, suddenly and without warning, a gunman opened fire at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The suspect is in custody, but our hearts break for the fallen, their families, the injured, including 3 police officers. The facts are still coming in, but we commend these courageous law enforcement officers for their swift response in the midst of this attack. As Las Vegas knows all too well, what happened in Pittsburgh today was not just criminal. It was evil. an attack on innocent Americans, and an assault on our freedom of religion. There is no place in America for violence or anti-Semitism, and this evil must end. I'm pleased to report to my fellow Americans that the President has directed the full resources of the federal government to support the investigation and the prosecution. And as the President said, anyone who does such a thing in a temple or a church should pay the ultimate price. For now, we urge every American to pray. Pray for the members of the Tree of Life Synagogue, for the fallen, the injured, and their families. Psalm 34 reads that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And let that be our prayer for them today. And let's also pray for the strength and wisdom to do everything in our power to bring these senseless acts of violence to an end. So help us God. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming out today. Thank you for coming out for a good man and a great cause. And I know the real reason you are here is because of Crescent.
Vice President Mike Pence weighing in, quoting scripture, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, when talking about the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. I want to bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's actually on the ground in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Caitlin, I know you were covering a different political event, but tell me what you know.
Hey, Rena, good to be with you. So I'm in Clarks Summit, Pennsylvania, which is about 6 miles outside of Scranton. So we're in the northeastern part of the state, which is about 5 hours from Pittsburgh. But I was here to cover campaign events because that Pennsylvania, of course, is at the center of the political world because it has many candidates running for office, for Senate, for governor, for congressional, federal offices. Most of these candidates have canceled events throughout the state today in light of this shooting. I was just with Congressman Matt Cartwright, who represents this area that I'm in. I was supposed to follow him around to various events that he had scheduled throughout the district today, and he told me that he is canceling all of them. He said he has been deeply affected. He's in a deep state of shock and horror. He said it deeply affects me to see what happened to our country. He said it deeply affects me to see what's happening in our country is what happened in places in Europe in the 1930s and 40s, of course, referring to World War II. He said there is no question that this was a gross act of anti-Semitism, and he said someone who did this was clearly deranged, filled with hatred and bigotry. And you heard also, of course, from the president today calling for the death penalty, also saying that more protection could be needed and things would have worked out differently. He said it is important to note that police officers were shot here as well. So the congressman I was talking to very much focused on the anti-Semitism component of this, but again, lots of campaigns suspending and canceling events today in light of the shooting.
Yeah, as you can imagine. Caitlin, I know we're just, a little less than 2 weeks now from midterms. I know it's nearly impossible to gauge how an act like this could affect the ballot box, but based on what you're talking to folks there, have you spoken to folks in Pennsylvania from the Jewish community? And we know, I mean, this is also a state that was hit by the Catholic scandal as well, the sex abuse scandal. How do you think religion and faith might play when people cast their ballots this midterm season?
Well, I can tell you that when I got here, and I've kind of been stopping into various different shops in the area that I'm in to try to talk to voters, and this was as the news was breaking. So for a lot of them, I was kind of telling them that the shooting had just occurred. So they were kind of reacting in a state of shock and horror and just lamenting the fact that this has become commonplace in this country. And so that's certainly the reaction soon after hearing this, of course. You've heard, though, from the president's daughter weighing in, Ivanka Trump weighing in on Twitter, condemning acts of violence against Jewish people. She, of course, herself is Jewish, having converted, and her husband is as well. You've heard the vice president there in that clip also condemning acts of anti-Semitism. You didn't hear as much from the president. The president focused more so on the death penalty. He said that should be used for whoever did this, stricter death penalty laws, and also arguing for more protection, as he said. And so I think you're going to hear a lot of reactions in the political world and outside of it focused on this being just an egregious act, and we'll kind of go from there.
Remind us again about Pennsylvania and the politics, and do we have a sense of where it was leaning at this point?
Right. So a lot of really interesting races happening in Pennsylvania, and there is a specific focus on Pittsburgh because the surrounding areas, there are a couple of different districts that are of interest in terms of being very competitive this cycle, and areas that Donald Trump was popular and that he won, but are leaning Democratic this time around as it relates to the congressional races. There's also a very competitive governor's race. Both candidates, of course, have suspended their campaign events, and you saw the governor going to the site today to talk about it. The current governor is a Democrat. You also have the current incumbent Senator Bob Casey running for re-election against Lou Barletta, who is a Trump supporter and is a Republican. So that is not as competitive as a race as it has been in previous cycles. The state, certainly in federal races, leaning more towards Democrats this time around. But Pennsylvania is a state that the president won. The district that I am currently in, he won in 2016, but they also voted for a Democrat as their representative in Congress. So the president does have a lot of supporters in Pennsylvania. It is a state that voted for him in 2016, but has voted for Democrats for the past 2 decades, at least on the federal level.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, CBSN political reporter on the ground in Pennsylvania, was with Representative Matt Cartwright as he is seeking a U.S. House seat. I want to thank you very much, Caitlin, for giving us a little perspective on how this is also impacting the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
You bet. I want to return you to our CBS Pittsburgh station, KDKA, monitoring the situation with live coverage.
You can call 412-432-4400. That will get you in touch with the FBI, who is now conducting this investigation. If you also have information that may help their investigation, you can call this number. But again, that was set up very quickly to help family members of the victims in this great time of need.
And we're covering the various angles of this story. We're focused on the scene in Squirrel Hill, on the investigation there. We're focused on the suspect, Robert Bowers, the investigation into his background, motive. We're also focused on the victims, some of whom remain in surgery as we speak. John Shumway is at UPMC Presbyterian Hospital, has been keeping us posted over the last few hours. John, what's the latest there?
Yeah, Ken, we just got an update from Mercy that patient that they have in surgery is still in surgery as we speak, and they are continuing to work on that person. Here at Presbyterian Hospital, they have 3 people in surgery and another remaining in stable condition and waiting to go into surgery. As far as we know, that situation has not changed. And, of course, the conditions of those who are in surgery, they use the term stable to indicate that they're able to move them from the emergency room to the surgical area in order to get them what they need in order to mitigate the injuries, but it doesn't indicate the severity of the injuries, which could be anywhere from, as we heard, all non-life-threatening, fortunately, as far as the police officers go, but it could be up to critical condition. We don't know about the 2 patients other than the police officers as far as the severity of their injuries and how critically wounded they were. But if you do the numbers, that's 5 people at UPMC Presby. 1 was treated and released. 1 at Mercy Hospital. hospital. And then, of course, we know the one person at Allegheny General Hospital who is believed to be the suspect. We've been told by multiple sources it is. Allegheny General won't confirm that, although we certainly expect to hear more on that at 4 o'clock. Now, I want to make a couple of points here. UPMC has told me that they are going to actually take part in that 4 o'clock press conference and will probably give us a little more details on exactly what they were dealing with here in the ER this morning. I will tell you that we have heard that this was an all hands on deck kind of situation in this Trauma One center as well as at Mercy when this happened, because they drew everyone from throughout the hospital down to the ER to handle the number of people coming in. Also, UPMC just put out this statement saying we're grateful for the outpouring of support for those wishing to donate blood in the wake of today's tragedy. At this time, UPMC does not need blood donors, but those wishing to give blood should go to the Central Blood Bank. So UPMC is asking people, don't come to the hospitals if you're looking to donate, but please turn instead to the Central Blood Bank for your donations, which of course are always needed, but in a situation like this where we have multiple casualties and surgeries going on, that need of course is multiplied. Also, the donation center that are open today, you can find them at the blood bank's website, and there are 5 centers that are open until 5 o'clock this afternoon. So if you want to give blood, just don't come to the hospitals. Work through the Central Blood Bank for that. But again, we're waiting for updates on the conditions. And guys, it looks like probably at that press conference at 4 o'clock where David is this afternoon, they will have the ER docs there to explain exactly what they were dealing with, the extent of the injuries, and the current conditions. But with 4 of the 6 being police officers, it is only logical that at least some who are in surgery at this hour are indeed police officers. That's pretty much what we have for you at this point.
All right, John, good information. Just let's clarify this about blood donations. No, people should not be showing up at the hospital, but Central Blood Bank, which is now known as Vitalant, V-I-T-A-L-A-N-T, if you want to contact them, they put out word this morning that blood donations were in fact needed, and that they would be keeping their donation centers open until 5 p.m. So open extra today to accommodate those who might want to come and donate blood. So if you are interested in doing that, in donating, the word from Vitalant, the former Central Blood Bank, is that donations are needed. Again, you can contact Vitalant if you're interested in donating.
And they do have several locations: Butler, Cranberry, downtown, Harmer, Fox Chapel, Greensburg. There are so many to mention here, so just check on their website. They do need them, as Ken mentioned.
All right, let's go back to Andy Sheehan, not far from Tree of Life. Andy?
Yeah, again, Ken, we're out here about a block away from Tree of Life, and people in the neighborhood have been coming here to where this blockade is, where the police have blocked this off, and trading information. What have you heard? People know that, some of their friends and loved ones are now deceased, and they are talking to each other. Have you heard this? Have you heard that? And then shaking their heads, and then, crying as the reality of this is starting to set in. I'm understanding that a couple blocks away from here at the Jewish Community Center, the JCC, which is basically the hub of the entire Jewish community in Squirrel Hill, people are meeting there, and that's where they are getting, good information about the extent of the injuries and the identities of people who have lost their lives today. We are learning more now about the gunman who we identified as Robert Bowers, 48 years old, apparently.
We want to interrupt to take you live to President Trump. He's just arrived in Indianapolis, where he's scheduled to hold a campaign rally. Let's listen in.
Everybody's involved. Everybody's involved. And I spoke with the governor, Governor Wolf. I spoke with the mayor of Pittsburgh, who's a terrific guy, and he is devastated. So we'll have a lot of information over the next hour. But a lot of people killed, a lot of people very badly wounded. And they say as a crime scene, it's one of the worst that some professionals that have seen many, many crime scenes, they say it's one of the worst that they've seen. So we'll be back with you in a little while. I'm going to, in my remarks, open with a statement about what took place. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
All right, President Trump is now en route to a campaign rally for farmers. We're going to take his events live as soon as he makes them as well. He has just landed in Indianapolis. We want to return you now to our CBS Pittsburgh station for live coverage. KDKA.
He was especially upset about Jewish immigration refugees coming into this country, and this, and somehow in this twisted head, premeditated and preceded this terrible tragedy. Speaking just a while ago with the former rabbi here, the Rabbi Emeritus of Tree of Life. Tree of Life is actually it contains 3 different synagogues, 3 different congregations. The original Tree of Life, another congregation called New Life, and another one called New Generation. So they would, all 3 synagogues would have been, holding services today. We heard a bris, a baby naming, and in addition to the traditional, the weekly Shabbat or Sabbath service. So 3 congregations assembled here today, full of people. The rabbi also said that when talking about what happened today, he said that the suspect was pinned in his office, his former office, which is the 3rd floor of the synagogue, and described it to us, a big desk, and we're to understand that the gunman had barricaded himself in there and exchanged gunfire with police, and during that crossfire, he was injured. We don't know whether he was shot, but he was injured in some way and is now taken to the hospital. Ken?
Andy, you might assume that if the suspect is in custody, that police also have recovered 1 or more weapons, but I don't want to assume anything. Do you have any information on that? What types of weapons, if you have anything?
I don't have information on the weapons, but I know that he was heavily armed, and that we have this grim tally, and we know that this many people were shot and critically wounded, and also wounded, and are now in the hospital. 4 police officers. So obviously he had multiple rounds and multiple magazines, and came in this premeditated and heavily armed. And the exact weaponry we do not know at this point.
Fair enough, Andy, thank you. And let's remember what the Public Safety Director, Wendell Hisrich, said earlier. First responders prevented this from being an even worse tragedy. There was a confrontation with this gunman. We now understand it was in the former rabbi's office on the 3rd floor. But the Public Safety Director crediting law enforcement with preventing this from being even a worse tragedy than it is. And again, you have to just step back and think about the courage, the bravery that's required when shots are being fired and you're running toward the danger.
There's no hesitation at all with those men and women. No hesitation at all.
So again, 4 police officers among those injured. 4 law enforcement officers. We understand that they all are expected to survive, but we don't have specifics on their conditions. And what must be agonizing for those with some connection to Tree of Life, with someone who may have been at the services this morning, is if you can't get a hold of people, where's the official information? We have no names to share, no names of victims, no names
ages
of injured. But as we can tell you, as Andy has been reporting, people are gathering at the Jewish Community Center in Squirrel Hill at the corner of Murray and Forbes. There's also at Berry Hall at Chatham University. Grief counselors are available. The Red Cross is setting